Good morning to all. Welcome to Day on the Hill 2021. It's going to be a little different this year. As you can tell, we're not climbing any hills or going down any hills this morning. Thank goodness, because of the snow. We're all comfortable. Our thoughts and prayers are, of course, with those that are without power this morning around the country. I got family in the Northwest, and I've got friends in Texas, and they've been without power and stuff for 5 days. So our thoughts are with them. And again, we're grateful for you to join us today. I've got a few thoughts I'd like to read. I'm not a big reader. I don't like to be read to, but I've got some things I'd like to pass along to you that I don't want to forget. This little seminar is different this year. We usually get together. We usually have lunch and dinner rather for the legislators. And with the pandemic the way it is, it just doesn't work that way. So here we are virtual, and we're excited to have you join us. It's a little different animal this year. We suspect that we'll do the same thing next year that we used to do with the dinner, but we'll get through this today, and I think that'll be rewarding, and I think it'll be something that we're glad we attended. My name is Carl Rostenberg. I'm currently the president of UAHU, and of course I'm on the board. And the UAHU board sounds like something that is on aisle 14 at Home Depot, but it's not really that kind of board. Your board, our board, consists of volunteers that make these events possible. They are agents, they're brokers, they're carriers, they're carrier reps, they're office staff, and they're CSRs. They market or sell or answer questions or prepare materials or set pricing or evaluate risk. They're carrier reps, office staff. They sell life insurance, dental insurance, health insurance, all the above, disability insurance. Everyone attending today most likely falls in the category that I just outlined. And it sounds very diverse, but the thing that brings us together is that being the goal of watching the back of our clients. Those clients being the small business person with 2 employees, the large group with hundreds of employees, the individual that's maybe just starting his business that wants to be your biggest client someday. And of course, where everybody ends up is on Medicare. And that's where people really need the help, because typically they just don't have a clue. Even after running all those employees, they don't have a clue what to do with Medicare. Those clients are just as important to us today as they were when they were managing 200, 300 thousands of employees. They still need a good agent to watch their back. They need to be an advocate and guide them through the murky waters of insurance, and a voice when it comes to legislative issues that affect the price they pay and the benefits they deserve. This is what unifies us, these goals. It's not about getting $431 back on our $430 dues that we pay. It's not about the financial return. Rather, it's the tools and the training to make us all better agents and a better partner to our small and large business owners and to the Medicare beneficiaries that they eventually become. Okay, back to this board, which, by the way, consists of many committees. Membership, professional development. Professional development tries to put these events together so we don't fall asleep. Financial, health policy, community service. All these things don't happen without committees. UPAC, all these things are set in motion to be sure that we achieve our goals both in UAHU and NAHU. And last but not least, our legislative committee, which I will shortly be turning the rest of the time over to. Each committee has a chairperson. Our legislative chairperson is Ernie Sweat. Many of you know, most of you know Ernie. He's been around for a long time and has a lot of experience with the legislature. He will be our mediator for today's event, and I'm very grateful for the hours that he and his committee has put together to invite speakers, retain sponsors, to work with our executive director team, to advertise to you, and to get the word out about this event. We're especially grateful for our sponsors today. Regents Blue Cross and Blue Shield, Cigna Healthcare, and United Healthcare We're grateful to them for partnering with UAHU to present our Day on the Hill event. Programs like this just don't happen without partners like these. Associations like ours don't exist. Excuse me. And our goals previously mentioned are not accomplished without carriers like this to partner with us. Let me not forget TDA Dental, who year after year has assisted us with the filing of your CE credits. After we have a CE event, those papers you get, those things we sign, all those have to be filed with the state, and there's a cost to do that. TDA for years has stepped up and financially helped us to do that, and we appreciate them very much. They don't get the recognition that perhaps they deserve, and I want them to know how much we appreciate that. And this gratitude, by the way, that I'm expressing to the sponsors and to TDA, that necessarily doesn't always have to come from me. It doesn't have to come from our board. These are people that you know that work for these carriers. These are individuals you run into all the time. If you're a member, take the time to express to you as a member the gratitude for their participation, for their sponsorship. It would mean a lot to them to hear from a member rather than just us, the board. So remember that if you brush shoulders with some of these sponsors. I'll wrap up with just a few calendar items for today that you need to be aware of coming down the road. March 10th will be our next CE event. We have 3 ethics presentations that day for a total of 3 hours. Those presentations have been applied for with the state. They're not approved yet. We have to go through a process each time to get those approved. So just so you know, they have been applied for. I suspect we'll be starting at 9 a.m. that morning and go till noon. Again, that'll be March 10th. We always try to do the CE events, as you've noticed, on the second Wednesday of each month. We'll try to always follow that format so that you'll be prepared and can counter those items. We'll be getting more information out to you at the bios on the speakers in the next, later this week, but that'll be a good way to wrap up your ethics CEs. The speakers are coming from our own Region 7 group, which are agents just like us, and they know the ins and outs of what we're supposed to be doing from an ethics standpoint. Another CE event will be on April 14th. There'll be more information coming about that. That's again the second Wednesday in April. Finally, I'll invite you to calendar our virtual sales congress this year. It'll be May 19th and 20th. It's a 2-day seminar. I guarantee you it'll be like nothing you've ever experienced as far as the sales congress goes. And I say that in a good way. Again, it'll be 2 days. It'll be affordable. We'll have some interesting speakers. I promise a sneak peek will be UAHU's own CEO, Janet Troutwine, who has some great information that is a result of the election regarding Medicare for All and the public option. She'll be taking an hour to present to us there. Greg Mattis, who many of you know and has presented in the past, he's the legal counsel for Intermountain Healthcare. He always has an exciting and entertaining presentation on the hospital status in the state. And also we'll have the delightful Denise Bravo. Many of you know Denise Bravo. She's from Region 7, the Region 7 board. She has a very insightful presentation on really making social media work for you or your agency. And that sounds, that's an awful broad brush, but I assure you that presentation will be a benefit to you. I've heard her speak several times, and I guarantee you that'll be worthwhile. A final reminder to those attending today, we do have a couple of non-members that signed up that we were excited to have you with us today. If your membership expired in the last 6 months or farther, you're going to be eligible for a $50 rebate from NAHU if you re-sign up. Also, you'll be refunded today's registration. Well, that's easy math. That's $110 toward the $400 plus registration fee to become a member again with NAHU. I would encourage you to do that. There's a form to fill out online. Get that to us, and we'll be sure that you get the proper rebates. Again, we're grateful for you to be with us today. There's been a lot of work go into this. Technology is sometimes not our friend, so bear with us. We'll do our best. But in that regard, I'll now turn the time over to our legislative chairman, Ernie Sweat. And Ernie, we'll turn that over to you. Thank you very much. Ernie, you're muted.
How about now? Can you hear me?
Hey, perfect. I told you there'd be technology glitches.
Yeah, let me kick the day off with technical issues. Okay.
Go right ahead. Thanks, Ernie.
Thanks for joining us, everyone. As Carl mentioned, this is a virtual day on the Hill. It's a difficult thing to pull off, but I appreciate so many people joining us this morning. I think you're really going to enjoy the program that we've put together for you. So why are we here? I'm sure that when you first started your business and you decided to step into the role of actually selling health insurance, that of all the things that you thought you'd be doing, lobbying your legislators is probably not one of them. But in reality, it's something that is important for all of us to be involved in. And the fact that you're here really does show that you do care and that you do want to be involved, and we're here to help you do that. Truth be told, what makes the news is what happens on a federal level, but it's really hard for pieces of legislation on a federal level when it comes to health insurance to be passed. And you remember how difficult it was for a pretty large majority on the Democratic side to get Obamacare passed. I mean, it's really, really difficult. That being said, we need to be mindful of where we are in DC right now. And I know that John Green later today will talk about that, because obviously whenever we've got one party in power, we need to pay more attention to what's happening, because that's certainly the environment that's going to give us legislation that, for better or worse, will affect what we do. That being said, insurance is regulated on a state basis. And I think we all know that. We have a state insurance commissioner. Every state that you're licensed in has one of those. And it's actually pretty easy for the state legislature to propose legislation and get it through. And some things, we will favor, and some things we will oppose. And if it's something we oppose, then we all need to gather together and try to make our legislators aware of our opinion on things. And that's a lot of what we do here. And certainly what my role is to help coordinate that with our lobbyists. Because truth be told, we can easily get a piece of legislation that affects us greatly that will come in at the 23rd hour. And we've seen this before. And I won't bore you with some of the legislation that we have been involved in either amending or putting to rest in the past. But I'll just tell you, our association has been very effective in the past. We will continue to be as effective as possible. But without the participation of everyone listening here, it is hard, really hard to get the word out. So, our new lobbyists will be talking to you about what's happening and kind of give you an idea of what's going on and kind of the things that we see coming. And you'll just have to keep a really, really close eye on that. So talking to you about our lobbyists, I'm excited to tell you we have a change. We have had a lobbyist for many years. Now we actually have two lobbyists. We have Derek Brown, we have Chase Everton. And already we've seen the value of having a team. We are looking forward to hearing from him and looking forward to introducing you to that individual. And one of the things that Derek is going to do is give us some advice on how to lobby during this time period, because things are weird right now. Things are unusual as far as the way that we go and communicate with our legislators. But we won't be patrolling the halls, but it will be possible, and we'll certainly cover that. If we have something where we have a call to action, we'll certainly let you know that. Also, keep an eye out. Our intention is on a weekly basis to send a legislative update to you. You've already seen those. Please open those. You can kind of see what's going on. You can see what we support, where we're neutral, but we're trying to keep an eye on everything that's happening on the legislative side. Few things to let you know. As our speakers are going, and we'll be introducing our first speaker here shortly, please put your questions in the Q&A section. I will be keeping an eye on that. And when our speakers are done, I'll be going through that section and asking questions. So feel free to send as many questions as you have, and we will do our best to get them all answered for you. Appreciate your participation today, and having that interaction is going to be very valuable. So please put those in there. Here's something else. I think one of the great innovations that we've had during this time of pandemic is the ability to put on continuing education classes. And I'm sure you know the drill, that during this time period, we are going to be asking some polling questions in order to get your continuing education credit. And we all need that. This has been a really, really tough time to get CE. Please, when the polling question comes up, you're going to be seeing 2 of those. Okay, we'll have 2 of these during the session. Please answer the question. There are times when, for whatever reason, you'll have some system issues, and if you have a difficult time answering that question, please put your answer in the Q&A or in the chat section rather, and we will get you credit. But it's extremely important that you do answer both of those. And as you probably seen in the past, there'll be really, really difficult questions, really things that will be extremely hard for you to answer. Of course, I'm joking about that. As far as just getting through and kind of getting through our entire program today, what our intention is we'll go through each speaker. We've got some videos to show you. I think you're really going to enjoy the program today. So that being said, let's go ahead and queue up our first speaker. Tangi Northrup is here to join us. I'm sure many of you who've been around for quite a long time, you know Tangi. She's been 30 years in the health insurance field, 25 years that she's served with the Utah Insurance Department, and she's currently serving as our deputy commissioner. She is responsible for to implementing state and federal reforms that come up. So that's a really important role that she serves. As far as what she does for the insurance department, she regulates our health policies, our life policies, and our annuities. So the things that we do that we make a living selling, she regulates these products and has been a real friend to us in the industry. She also oversees contracting and budgeting. Right now, she's really, really busy, so we're so lucky to have her here. When the legislature's in session, she represents the insurance department on issues, task forces, committees, and she also serves on a health committee for the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. She's a key advisor to the governor, insurance commissioner, our state legislators. She has a Bachelor of Science in Business Management Finance from Westminster. So I will go ahead and hand things over to Tangi. Tangi, thank you for joining us, and you're on.
Thanks, Ernie. I just want to say my appreciation for inviting me to participate in this conference today. I greatly appreciate the work that UAHU does in the community and the knowledge that you provide to your members. And so I want to also thank your members for attending today's event and taking that opportunity. The insurance department greatly appreciates it when producers stay active in their respective industries. Your participation in these events are crucial, and they give you opportunities for staying up to date with current health insurance practices, helping you become or being a better health insurance expert. The training also helps you stand out as a producer in the competitive market that you work in. But most importantly, from my viewpoint, I think it helps provide you the tools to serve your customers in the best manner possible. So great news, like Ernie was saying earlier, attending events such as this today provides you continuing education hours. So for Utah, many of you know that's 24 credit hours every 2 years, and 3 of those hours must be ethic courses. Utah does have a grandfather provision for the continuing ed though, and that's for producers who are first licensed before December 31st, 1982. The insurers and you as producers are in a position of trust. Your customers expect the insurer to fulfill the promises of the policy, and they trust you to represent the insurance products accurately and honestly. Ethics courses are a key to a successful career. If a producer focuses on doing the best for each customer and measures their success by the means this is accomplished, the producer is more likely to act ethically than a producer who measures their success primarily by the amount of recognition or money gained, with little thought to the means taken to achieve it. A producer is a key element for compliance with the state insurance laws. You act almost as a gatekeeper for compliance issues between what may be an insurer issue or maybe even others in your market who aren't acting ethically. But you also have the responsibility to act ethically in the best interests of your customers. There are several requirements for producers that are outlined in code. Specifically, if you looked at Chapter 23A, Part 4, you'll see a laundry list. But unethical behavior can also result from misrepresentation. If you're trying to assist someone or if you have a lack of knowledge, it's very important for you to study and understand the products you are representing them so you can accurately present them to your customers. Some of the department's most recent investigations of unethical behavior, but also illegal under the insurance code, would be forging signatures. Maybe you couldn't get the appropriate document to your customer, so you chose to sign on their behalf. Or not accurately disclosing the healthcare conditions. Maybe you don't have them state that they have health issues or heart issues so that the policy can get issued. Or allowing an unlicensed producer to conduct business on your behalf. Are you keeping your system secure? Are you assuring that only you have access or a person who is licensed has that access to work on your behalf? It's always important to make sure that you accurately represent the insurance policy. Not only the good things in the policy and the benefits that they can provide, but maybe something that isn't going to meet the best needs of your client. And you're weighing the balances between the two and trying to find the best fit. And then, of course, we'd never want to see anyone, but we do see producers who are fabricating documents. Those seem like really simple things to do or not do, but it's important to just always stop and question yourself. The people who had these unethical practices that they engaged in, and I mean, this is in the last year maybe, I think they're good people. I think they were trying to do what they thought was best for their client. But it's not. And it's important to just sometimes take a step back and question yourself and making sure you are doing the right thing. There is an area of concern that the insurance department would like to share with you today, and that's increased marketing for accepted benefits. These are the plans that are exempt under the Affordable Care Act. We've seen an influx in our market of these short-term limited duration policies. The total collected premium on these types of policies in 2019 was $5.6 million. That is up from 2018, where it was $3.1 million, and 180% growth. We don't have the figures yet for 2020, but we expect those premium volumes will continue to increase. But we recognize and we understand that there are very appropriate opportunities, and the best practice is a short-term limited duration plan, such as filling a gap between group coverage. However, we continue to receive complaints on how the short-term limited duration plans are marketed. These policies should never be offered as a replacement to comprehensive health insurance. Even when you take the short-term policy and you combine it with supplemental policies such as hospital indemnity, vision, or dental, they're very attractive. The premiums for short-term limited duration plans are minimal compared to premiums for comprehensive health insurance. But it's important to remind your consumers that the protections provided under the Affordable Care Act are not present in these short-term limited plans. such as they are allowed to exclude coverage for pre-existing conditions. They can apply annual and lifetime limits, and they can exclude coverage for preventative care or even mental health care. Just as a side note, and I'm sure probably everyone is aware, but we do have a unique opportunity. When you're talking to your clients and what's the best fit, there is an open enrollment for healthcare.gov for those individual plans, and it's staying open until May 15th. So keep that in mind also when you're trying to determine, today which plan might work best, knowing that a year ago during this time frame there wasn't the opportunity for open enrollment. So on a national level, the insurance department, specifically me, I'm following some hot topics, and that is mental health and substance abuse parity. We are doing a lot of work on it at the National Association of Insurance Commissioners, and we're closely working with the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services in trying to develop best practices. We're also at the NEIC level looking closely at long-term care insurance. We're aware that that market has significantly declined, and we're trying to determine how to best keep that product viable, but also assure that the insurers are able to collect the premium necessary to offer the product. And then the most recent item is the new federal law that passed in December with the Consolidated Appropriations Act, and that's the No Surprises Act. So the No Surprises Act does go into effect on January 1, 2022. We see it as a great bill because it's far more expansive than any state could pass, because it extends to self-insurance plans. Those self-insurance plans on a national basis account for about 135 million plans nationwide. The Act does apply to all comprehensive health care across the board, grandfathered, non-grandfathered, fully insured, self-insured. But it does not apply to accepted benefits. Again, short-term limited duration, hospital indemnity, dental, or vision. It's important to note that the No Surprises Act does prohibit balance billing in certain circumstances. So a non-emergency care that's performed at an in-network facility. That seems to be a common complaint that we receive at the department, where the patient goes to what they think is in-network and expect the providers to all be in-network. So in the instance that there is an out-of-network clinician providing services at an in-network facility, they cannot balance bill for that. Also, of course, emergency care provided at in-network or out-of-network facilities, and that extends to your post-stabilization services. And then ambulance services, and this is where another far reach that the state wouldn't have been able to address, and that's air ambulance. So we have our ground ambulance. Utah actually has some really great laws regarding the reimbursement rates for ground ambulance. It's not the same in other states. We receive complaints from patients who maybe are traveling outside the state. But air ambulance is something the states don't have the ability to regulate. And so through this bill, the air ambulance services will be regulated. So during the first year of implementation, 2022, we see that there's going to be some opportunities for you to assist your clients if they receive a balance bill from a healthcare provider. Your customers shouldn't be receiving a balance bill. And so if you do receive a complaint from an insured, try and help them work through and understand what the No Surprises Act provides for their benefits. Of course, your customers or you are always welcome to contact the insurance department. The rules regarding the No Surprises Act are not anywhere near being finalized. They haven't even been drafted and out for comment. So we do suspect that there's going to be a lot of activity in this first 6 months of the year addressing regulations to implement the No Cares Act. But so more to come. And then just in closing, I just want to remind you, the insurance department is here to help you, to assist you. We want to help you work through your questions or your concerns. We would love to receive a phone call if you're questioning something you're planning on doing that you're not sure if it would be compliant or not. Please pick up the phone, give us a call, reach out through our website. And then lastly, just for a point of reference on contacting us, the insurance department is moving off Capitol Hill on March 15th. So we're going to be moving out to the new Taylorsville office, and we will be updating our website with our new contact information when we get closer to that date. So I would hope we have some questions. I'd love to answer anyone's questions.
I have a couple questions for you here, Tanji. One is you mentioned the No Surprises Act. Do you suspect that the No Surprises Act will fix the problems that we're having with emergency rooms out of network, ambulances out of network, or will we still need some legislation on the state level to fix this?
I personally think, from what I've seen so far, the No Surprises Act is going to solve it on the state level, and that any bill that the state can pass, the federal law already encompasses, and then the federal law extends beyond that. And it's important to point out, this doesn't apply to a person who maybe goes to an out-of-network doctor for a visit. This is specific to in-network facilities who have out-of-network caregivers or instances of emergency care.
Okay, another question. You talked about some of the problems with short-term claim policies. Has the department received complaints from individuals who've had significant claims denied that were on these policies?
We have. So, our greatest concern, and it is because of the complaints that we receive, is once these people go on claim, they didn't understand the policy they bought. And so, either most often it's a denial for pre-existing conditions. I think the public has really been focused through the ACA that, your health plan can't deny for pre-existing conditions. Well, the short-term plan can, and they don't understand what they've purchased. So it's not that the policy itself is non-compliant, it's the understanding of the individual of what they actually purchased it. And in some instances, it was represented to them different than what the policy was. In the best world, we'd see all of our customers reading their policies, but unfortunately, we know that doesn't happen. And so we just ask that you as a producer take the time, and if you are offering these types of policies, make sure the customer understands what they're purchasing.
Okay, another question. You mentioned a move to Taylorsville. Can you say specifically where the office in Taylorsville will be, and is there a reason that Taylorsville was chosen as a location?
So Taylorsville was selected by the state, and it's a consolidation of state offices and leased offices to reduce our building costs as a state as a whole. And so the insurance department was selected to move to that because everyone's moving out of the state office building. And it's my understanding that the state office building is going to be demolished, and there's going to be more parking. And I think they're also doing something for the Department of Heritage and Arts. So at the Taylorsville office, we'll be in room 2300. So we have a nice office space that they've provided for us, plenty of room to meet with people. And so we're excited. It's going to be good. We're right off the freeway, so hopefully it's a little bit easier access also than having to come up to the Capitol. but I will definitely miss running across the plaza to go to a meeting at the Capitol.
Okay, another question that's come through. We've talked a little bit about complaints that have been filed related to short-term policies already, but a question's come through if you had similar complaints about Christian ministry plans where claims have been denied or people not understanding the plan that they've purchased.
You know, that's a very interesting dynamic. We have heard other states who are having significant issues with these health sharing ministries. Utah is not receiving complaints. We're aware that they're out there marketing. We are concerned with the solvency of these entities, but consumers aren't contacting us. We don't have the complaints.
Okay, and just one more question, and then we'll wrap this up. You have a new insurance commissioner. We have a new insurance commissioner. Can you tell us a little bit about this gentleman?
Sure. So his name is John Pike, and he is from St. George. He previously worked for Select Health and also served as the mayor of St. George. And I'll have to tell you, I'm loving working with him. He's knowledgeable. He gets what you producers are doing. He held a producer license. Of course, when you go to work for the insurance department, you have to place any license on hold. But he has that knowledge, and he's been not actively selling, but he obtained his producer license so that when he was out working with producers, he's able to be knowledgeable about the work you do. So I'm excited for you to have the opportunity to meet him one day. He's a great person. I think you're going to really enjoy him as the commissioner. And I think that, you know, he's definitely a person who's willing to listen and address issues.
Okay, well, thank you very much for your time this morning, Tangi. I know you're extremely busy. We always appreciate the time that you take to spend with us. You've been a great partner for our association and the members of the association for many years. And just, we don't tell you enough how much we appreciate what you do. And thanks for being so available to us when we do have questions. So I wish you well, and thank you so much. Okay, we have a video to play for you from Senate President Stuart Adams.
For all of us, ways to participate in our session.
Okay, I'm wondering if we ought to, let's go back to this. We've actually got a couple videos, and while we're, hey, I think Carl mentioned we might have some technical difficulties. Looks like we're having that. We actually have a couple of really nice videos to show you today if we can get those queued up. All right. our lobbyist, Derek Brown, is on. So we're going to go ahead and introduce him. I've got a little bit to tell you about him. Before I get into this, though, this is going to be our first hour of continuing education. So it appears that there could be a couple folks on the phone only. Just so you know, you really need to be able to not only hear this presentation, but actually be able to see it in order for us to be approved to give you a continuing education credit. So did get a question about an iPad. iPad is fine, but if you're on your phone only, that's going to be a challenge for you. So if you have the opportunity to log in and view our presentation, please do so. All right, so I've already talked to you a little bit about Derek Brown, our new lobbyist, and we're just really excited to have him. When the board was out looking for a new lobbyist, it was one of those situations where we had a chance to talk to Derek, meet Derek. I think the decision was made pretty much immediately that he was going to be the right guy for our organization. I think, like a lot of people, you go through that perfunctory process of talking to other folks, but it was pretty obvious to us when we first met Derek that he was going to be a good fit for our organization. There's a few reasons for that. First off, and this is a big deal, people think that we are an organization that represents insurance companies. We don't. The insurance companies represent themselves. We represent small business owners, and you guys know that. But some of the hardest messages to get across to legislators is that's really who we are. We're out there trying to advocate for our clients, trying to advocate for those companies that are struggling to pay their premiums. And passing along a 2 or 3% increase might not sound a lot to some legislators, but our clients know. If you've never run a small business, you really don't understand that. Our lobbyist has done that. Derek has a background in managing a Utah company, which is a big deal for us. He's an attorney by background, currently managing partner of the Utah Policy Advocates. As I mentioned, he and Chase are just doing a great job for us. He also has a great background in politics, former state representative on the federal level. He was the chief counsel to Senator Bob Bennett and the chief of staff to Senator Mike Lee. So really excited to have him present to you. So Derek, I'm going to hand things over to you, and thanks for joining us.
Great, thanks, Ernie. And as I'm doing this, my understanding is you can ask questions. I guess just put them in the chat, and then Ernie, you just pop up whenever if there's questions. I wish this were sort of more interactive, but it is kind of what it is. And so what I'm going to do, and Ernie, make sure that this in terms of from a hang on one second. Let me just make sure from a standpoint of everything we've got, I'm able to share my screen. You know what? It will not let me share my screen. Hang on one second. I need to do screen share here. And on that note, I think, why don't we do that? Meredith, are you able to do the screen share?
Yep, I can.
Okay, that would be great. Yeah, it's one of those system preferences things where it stops the screen share and won't let me do that. So I appreciate that. So everyone, it's great to have you here. And then Meredith, I'll have you pull that our presentation up. Thanks, Ernie, for the introduction. I appreciate that. My background, as he mentioned, I'm an attorney, but I'm kind of what I like to call a recovering attorney. I practiced law. I spent a number of years doing that, and spent time billing hours and sort of going through that whole rigmarole. And now I have a lot more fun. Love doing what I'm doing. And so yeah, Meredith, let's just start there, and you can go to the next one. And so let me just do a couple of things. First of all, let me just have some fun. Yeah, let's just start right there. Ernie talked about lobbying, and we sometimes get a bad rap, but let me start first of all. Actually, back up one, Meredith. Let me just give you a little bit of background of what I've done, and let's go the other direction. And that's my partner, Chase. Chase is actually working another issue right now. Today is one of those days where, ironically, we're all kind of from home, and I think based on the weather we're having here in Utah, those of you who are up in sort of the northern part of the state, This doesn't apply to any of you that are down in, the Washington County area, but we have a foot or so of snow. We realized last night or found out that there's no school today. So my kids are thrilled, and they're upstairs doing whatever they're doing. As parents, when we find out that the school is canceled, it's like, oh no, how are we going to do this? But ironically, I don't even know if we could have done, Day on the Hill, UAHU Day on the Hill today, just because of all the snow. But anyway, so long story short, my background is I'm an attorney. I used to practice law in DC with a large firm. I've spent some time both on Capitol Hill. I was a legislator. My wife and I, for a number of years, ran a small business. And at the end of every year, we also spent time with our underwriter. I mean, we used Ryan McDermott, actually. And so at the end of every year, Ryan would come in and he'd do the presentation and help us kind of walk through all the details. And, we'd give him a hard time, the cost increases, hey, how is this? And, and so I know, and he did a great job for us. And we still use him. And the reality is I understand those dynamics that you have to deal with, because you really are looking out for costs for your clients, and you're kind of on the front lines. And the insurance companies, of course, as Ernie mentioned, have their own folks. But you really need to be effective, and you are effective in terms of maintaining those costs, looking at them, and understanding what it is that goes into the process. And so now let's move forward. One, Meredith, thanks. So from a lobbying standpoint, we sometimes get a bad rap. And you see, I just kind of pulled a couple of these different cartoons. You hear this all the time. But the reality is, it's one of those things. It's like an attorney. I mean, when I was an attorney, we used to have, the attorney jokes you hear are, and by the way, I hope that you're okay just having a little bit of, fun here, because this is usually what we would do is we'd have a UAHU Day on the Hill. We'd have the presentation going in the administration building in the auditorium or something, and then we would just grab different legislators to come in and talk to you. Since we can't do that today, we're going to talk a little bit about what lobbying entails, what it is that we're doing, what it is UAHU does in terms of the Hill and advocacy, and then if you have any questions along the way, just feel free to ask. And so anyway, from a lobbying standpoint, the reality is it's sort of like when I used to practice law. I mean, the legal jokes were, in fact, when I worked with Senator Lee, who is a lawyer, his dad was also a lawyer, and his dad used to say, the problem with the law and the legal profession is that, there's only, how does he say? He said, there's only 60,000 bad apples that give the rest of us a bad name. And, and it's funny because there's sort of these ongoing legal jokes, and from a lobbying standpoint, same thing. But it's sort of like, unless you have actually needed an attorney, you don't understand the value that they bring. And I think it's the same thing with doing government relations. Go to the next screen, Meredith. We've got, I just want to talk about what it is that we do. There's a lot of what we do is involved in the process, and not just, I mean, some people think that we just kind of will go up when there's one specific issue, but the reality is we want to be involved in the entire process, and we are. I mean, what we do is, if there are bills or legislation that are really important to the industry, then we'll work on that. We'll work on, and it's a long process. I mean, as you know, we have a 45-day session, but as I like to say, we actually have a year-long session, but we're just voting 45 days out of the year. And I say that because as soon as the session ends, by the way, we're over halfway through the session. It ends on March 5th, so that's 2 weeks from Friday. And then about a month or so later, we'll start having interim meetings. And so every third Wednesday, there will be interim meetings. And those will take place all throughout the year. And so that's where the interim committees will workshop bills. And effective lobbying is being involved at that process as well. And working with individuals who are knowledgeable about our industry. I mean, one of the great things we have in Utah is, and I love this, that we have a legislature that is part-time. They don't do it for a profession. I mean, in some states like California, if you're elected to the California State Assembly, that's what you do. That's your job. That's what you're paid to do, your full-time job. is to think up new laws. And so consequently, the number of laws they have in California is just off the charts. I went to law school in California, and the code books for the California state law fill up an entire bookshelf. When I served in the Utah House of Representatives, I had the entire code book, and this was 8 or 9 years ago, but I had the entire code book on my desk. There were basically 5 volumes, and I could pull at any moment and flip through it. And I love that because we have a lot more, we're a lot more effective, I think, here in Utah. And the nice thing is, in 45 days, when the session ends, it's over. And what that means is any bill that's in the process of being worked, at midnight on the 45th day, it literally ends. It's over, it's done. And some people wonder, well, you know, how hard and fast is that midnight rule? Well, 3 years ago, I had a bill that I had, or a piece of legislation I had worked on with a large technology company. And we got a late start. I mean, if you're looking at passing bills, like we're talking number one here, passing bills, if you're looking at passing bills, you've got to get started early because it takes a long time to work through the process. This is a client that made a decision late to work on something. A lot of legislators liked it. We worked on it, but it was just the last week or two of the session. And it literally passed the session, passed the Senate House, passed the Senate. They made some changes, and it passed the Senate at like 11:45 at night. And they sent it back to the House, but it got there at like 12:03 a.m. and they had just ended. And so the bill literally died, and we had to start the process from scratch. And the bill then passed the following session. It was one of the first bills to pass. But what we do when we pass bills is we work with legislators who understand what our industry is. And the reason I mentioned the part-time legislative thing is because we have subject matter experts in the legislature. We have attorneys, we have realtors, and we have individuals like Representative Dunnigan, who has generally been looked to as a subject matter expert. I mean, to the extent, as you know, there is a subject matter expert on our issues in the legislature. It's Representative Dunnigan. And he's someone that understands a lot of the nuances, and he used to chair the Business and Labor Committee. And so any major pieces of legislation involving our industry generally had to do with him. And he was on the front lines helping work through those issues. And even though he's part of our industry, he was always perceived, and still is, as being very fair and even-handed and understanding these issues. So anyway, that's one of the things we do, is we help shepherd a bill through from beginning to end. Another thing, like number 2, we help amend bills. If there are issues, and by the way, we work with Ernie and Carl, and we meet with them weekly or more often if we need to. And we'll talk a little bit more about some of those issues as we go through, but we meet regularly. And as things pop up, we look at them and we say, hey, is this a bill that we need to worry about, that we like, that we should support? And a lot of times you'll see a bill that pops up that a legislator has introduced, and there will be things that we want to amend. I was working with another client specifically on a bill involving vaccination, funny enough, and someone had an issue with it. So we actually just called up the representative, got him on the phone, walked through it, and the representative said, oh, those lines that you're concerned about are actually going to be taken out when it gets to the Senate. And sure enough, it was. And so that's one of the things we do, is we look through and we help amend those bills. Sometimes we'll have to go into overdrive defeating bills, and that's just part of what we do. Another aspect of what we do is we help with the process of sort of we support like the bill sponsors if they need support behind the scenes, meaning press, PR, op-eds. Sometimes, I mean, a legislator will have an idea for a great bill, but they're kind of on their own. And so what we'll do is we'll provide that backup, and we'll help talk to other legislators for them, because they need a team. I mean, they don't have full-time staff. And so they sometimes are kind of on their own. So we'll do that. Number 5, we help with public relations. And then number 6, we just do a lot of behind the scenes work to help out. And so anyway, that being said, that's kind of what we do, kind of an overview. Meredith, can you go to the next slide? And you just heard, and this was an interesting story. When I worked with Senator Lee's office, this is a picture that was taken of his office in Washington, D.C. And what's interesting about this is this was, I believe, 2016 when it was taken. And this stands about 4 feet high, if you can picture that. And this is all of the federal regulations passed the previous year. So the Obama administration had all of the proposed regs from all of the agencies, and he put this in this cabinet. And if you look closely on the top, do you see that stack of papers on the top right? Those are the bills that were passed during the same year. And so he would do that to sort of show the impact of regulations and the fact that the law, I mean, in this case, that year, it was about 500-600 pages of laws passed by Congress and roughly 30,000 pages, or about an 11-foot stack of regulations. And so it's really critical that we get the laws right. And a lot of times what they do is they'll pass a law and then they'll kick it over to the agency to make the rules. And in fact, you just heard Tanji talk about the No Surprises Act at the federal level. And she mentioned that during the first 6 months, we're going to see rulemaking specifically on that issue. And so, the bill itself was, a couple hundred pages, but you're going to see thousands of pages of rulemaking. And so it's really critical that we follow sort of this entire process, and that we do it in a way where, here in Utah at least, we're involved from beginning to end, and that we're involved in the press side of things too. We want to make sure that there's also not just good laws and being helpful from behind the scenes at the Capitol, but also working from a PR standpoint. Okay, Meredith, the next slide. This is kind of a funny story. This was a picture that was in one of the major papers in Utah of a group of legislators, and this was the headline right above that picture. And so you look at that, and this is a couple of years ago, and you look at that, and it's pretty clear. You've got House members. These are all House members that are two of them actually. The two gentlemen in the back of Senators McKell and McKay are both now in the Senate. And the individual sitting down is Representative Gibson. He's the House Majority Leader. But this picture was taken. Ironically, they were in a break one night in the House and doing what they call sauntering, where they're waiting for the Senate to do something. And Representative Gibson was watching his daughter play, and it was online. She was playing basketball, and they were all just kind of watching her play, and he couldn't be there because he was in the House at the time. And apparently she made like a game-winning shot. And at that moment, they all jumped up and went, woo, and caught the picture. And then the headline right above it, of course, had nothing to do with the picture at all. And so, I mean, one of the things we need to do is we need to be careful about how things on the Hill are perceived, because the headlines you read and the stories you read about what happens are not always, they don't always mesh with what in fact happened at the hearing. And so that's one of the reasons it's important for us as an organization to be part of what's going on. Meredith, the next slide is what we need to do as an organization. And you've done this for years, and we need to continue to do this, is build what I call political capital, which means to be involved with those legislators and to understand the process, but to help them as well. Because what I want to do here in a moment is sort of go through, and for those of you who are in front of a computer, have you kind of look and see who your legislators are. But it's important that we get to know them and we get to know who they are, and that for them to know who you are. Because when I served in the House of Representatives, it was interesting to me that just kind of a funny side note, I remember it was the first week I got there, and there are roughly 38,000 people voting, 38,000 people who live in a Utah House district. And for the Senate, it's more like 100,000. But I remember I was talking with Representative Dunnigan, and he made kind of the funny comment. He said, Derek, when if you ever sort of start thinking you're all important because you're in the House of Representatives, he said, remember that maybe 1% of your district even knows who you are. He goes, and then when you've been around as long as I have, it goes up to like 2%. And he was kind of joking, and it was sort of, tongue-in-cheek comment. And at the same time, there was a lot of truth in it. I was surprised, even though I would get lots of email and correspondence from people living in my area, I was surprised at how little I would get relative to the size of the area. I mean, if I got 10 emails and 3 phone calls on a particular bill, like that really stood out. And I tell you that because it is important for us as an organization to reach out to our House and Senate members, your House and Senate members, where you live. And also it's helpful to reach out if you work, which is very possible, if you work if your business location is in a different area, to know who are the House and Senate members that represent that area as well. Let me go down to
Derek.
Meredith.
I'm going to cut in
Yeah.
now. It is
Yes.
time for our first polling question.
All right. You made this one difficult.
We always do. Thank you. Remember to put your answer in the chat line if for some reason you're having a hard time answering.
So Ernie, can I keep going? I don't want to distract anyone
please.
from the very difficult question that.
Yeah, please go.
maybe,
We'll do this again, just another 15, 20 minutes.
Okay, Meredith, can you go down 2 slides? When the poll moves over, you'll see one of the things that is important to understand is how these bills that we work on become laws. And ultimately what we've got, in fact, I can actually move this over on my screen as well, but just a really quick kind of view of what this is we work at all stages of this, and we need you as members to sometimes engage at different parts of this process, because it's a long process and yet it can become very, very short. Because if a bill is introduced near the end of the session, then we have to move fast. And in fact, Ernie, I need to chat with you after. There was a bill introduced last night with the title Balanced Billing. Senator Maine, and we'll go through kind of later today, Ernie, we need to chat and kind of look through the language really quick. But when we see a bill like that comes up, we jump on that. And we want to make sure that if it's something we like, we help it along. If it's something we don't like, we slow it down. And so as you look through this, how a bill becomes law graph, they start at the legislative drafting process. And there's 40 or 50 attorneys who draft. That's what they do, is they draft legislation. And as the legislator will work with them. And when I've worked with clients to specifically work on and push legislation, sometimes they'll just have me be the point person, and I'll work with the drafting attorney on the language. And then it gets read onto the Senate or House floor. And at that point, it goes to the Rules Committee. And this is one of these committees that you may have heard about. It's a behind the scenes sort of inside ballgame thing, but it is incredibly important. They have an analog at the federal level as well. In the House of Representatives, for instance, it's an individual named Representative Tim Hawks, who does a fantastic job. He's up in Davis County. And so Representative Hawks has a half a dozen or so members of that committee, and they vote on where the bills go once they're read in. And sometimes where the bills don't go. Sometimes there are certain bills right now that are stuck in that committee, and the committee isn't going to let them out. And it's very important. I used to be the vice chair of that committee, and we would have members that would come to us and say, listen, I'm pretty sure that if it goes to business and labor, my particular bill, then it's going to pass. If it goes to government ops, it's not going to pass. And then there was an immense amount of power really in that committee to make a determination on whether the bill passes or not, simply by which committee it goes to. And so there's a real sort of behind the scenes, it's the politics within the politics. And so if you haven't heard of that, it really, it goes on, and it is fascinating to see how that takes place. So then we have a committee hearing. Once it goes to a committee, the committee chair has to schedule it, but you've got to have 24 hours notice. And so a lot of times, and we'll see this in the next couple of weeks, they'll post an agenda, and we'll let Ernie and Carl know, and we've got 24 hours before there's an actual hearing on the bill. And so within 24 hours, you'll have this hearing, usually the next day. We'll know about it. We can testify. And by the way, with COVID going on, anyone can participate in any hearing remotely. And so that's one of the benefits of COVID is instead of having to go to the Capitol to testify, they have a WebEx form system where you just need to click on it. And then the chair of the committee will, when he gets to the public part of the participation, which is they'll go through, they'll present the bill, questions by members of the committee, and then they always open up every bill to public input. And so that's another thing I love that we do here in Utah. There's always public input. And if you want to talk to a bill, you can certainly, anyone can do that. So then they vote on it. If it passes by majority, it goes back to either the House or the Senate, the full body. They then have to vote on it and they have debate and whatnot there. And then at that point, if it passes, it goes through and to the other body and it goes through all over again. So it's a long process and yet it goes really quickly here in Utah. So, okay, Meredith, let's go to the next one. And you know, one of the things that's kind of funny, a number of years ago, this was 2011. I don't know if you remember this. There was a bill that we sort of jokingly talked about. It was the feral cat bill. It was legislation that basically said you can shoot a cat if there is reasonable belief that it is feral. And there were all sorts of national news stories. If you know Stephen Colbert, the comedian, he had a piece on it in Utah. And so we had this committee hearing, and the specific, and I was sat on that committee. It was the Judiciary Committee, and the specific legal question was, how do you know if a cat is feral? And I mean, it was kind of comical, and there were some heated passions. And at the end, I mean, I just decided, and we realized that the answer is you just look in their eyes and you know if a cat is feral. That was the answer. We passed this bill after all these amendments and changes. It went to the House floor. At that point, they discussed it, they debated it, they changed it again. And then it went over to the Senate after all that hoopla. And the Senate sort of collectively yawned and just killed the bill. And so that's the process where you have it going from one house to the other. I mean, it is kind of funny, but anyway, so that's the committees, their job is to workshop these bills. Sometimes they don't make it through, sometimes they make it through. And the ones that do, generally speaking, you can rely on the committee having done their work. And that's the point of the committee. So, okay, Meredith, next slide real quick. This is so I'm not able to share my screen for some reason. This is a screenshot of the legislative page. If you're just kind of on your computer right now and you can push the Zoom screen to the side, if you have a second, you go to this page. It's le.utah.gov. And this is a screenshot of what it looks like. And there's a number of things you can do here. I mean, I use this all day long because we go through and we can track every bill, where it is, any amendment. On resources on the bottom left, you can see what the House and Senate are doing at any given moment. On the bottom right, where it says My Legislators, if you're looking at it, click on that. And in fact, Meredith, go to the next slide. And it looks like that. If you click on that, you can enter your address and your zip code, and then it will pop up who is your legislator. Can you go to the next slide, Meredith? I did it last night when I was kind of looking through it. This is what it looks like for me. So these are my legislators, my member of the House, my member of the Senate. I would love for each of you as part of our organization to do this and get to know your representatives. I mean, Robert Spendlove is my representative. He actually won the House seat when I was in that seat, and I left to go work with Senator Mike Lee for a number of years. And so he's the one that won that position when I left. He is an economist by training, works at Zions Bank, teaches classes on public administration at the University of Utah, and used to work with both Governor Huntsman and Governor Herbert. And so when it comes to economic policy, he's a very smart guy, and he's also the chair of the Rev and Tax Committee. Then on the right, my senator is Senator Collimore, who is an attorney and very responsive to any of the questions that we have. He serves on a number of committees. He's also in Senate leadership, which makes him kind of one of the key members in the Senate. Those are mine. Take a moment and do the same thing yourself. Who is your representative? Who's your senator? And if there's sort of one homework assignment, I mean, Ernie, I mean, in addition to the polls, I mean, the one homework assignment I would like to issue, if you haven't done it, is to, through that link that they give you, you can send a message to them. And I would love for every member of our organization to at least get to know who your House and Senate member is. And here's why. Here's why it's important. When I served in the House, I sort of collected different people who were subject matter experts. I knew who my realtors were. I knew who my underwriters were. I knew who my attorneys were who specialized in different areas. You know, I had a lot of these people who would reach out, and I knew who my teachers were. And when I saw a bill that involved one of those areas of interest, a lot of times, like if I had 4 or 5 realtors who would continually reach out, and I'll use them as an example, anytime I saw a bill that had to do with land use issues or something that would affect real property, a lot of times I'd send them an email and I'd say, okay, hey, you know, team, this bill says that it does this and this and this, and it looks to me based on the language it does, but like on the ground, is that actually what it does? And I would always get really amazing feedback from people in my district because they knew that I was listening to them, number one, but number two, I could realize if sort of on the ground where the rubber meets the road, if the bill actually did what they said it did. I would love for each of you, if you can take the time to reach out, let them know, and be that person for your representative. Let them know, you know, you're a producer and underwriter, you work in the insurance industry, so that if they have bills that involve, you know, health insurance that impact health insurance costs for small businesses, that they can reach out, to you, and that you are willing as well to reach out. And if you establish that relationship ahead of time, then when we need those relationships, when we have critical moments, you can reach out to them on behalf of the association. So that's kind of one of the critical issues that I wanted to the extent there's any homework today, to the extent there's anything that I kind of the takeaway, if I could ask for one thing, it is get to know your House and Senate members. And you would be surprised at how little email they actually get from constituents. They get a lot of email, and a lot of it is just garbage stuff that just like you'll have a system that generates lots of emails that go to all legislators on a particular issue. And you know, I represented the sort of Cottonwood Heights and Sandy area of the state. And if someone emailed me and said, hey, I'm, you know, from Logan, I knew they weren't in my district. So I always paid particular attention to the people in my district. And so that's a dynamic that I want you to be aware of, because that is critical to what we do at UAHU and critical to what we do in terms of advocacy. Okay, Meredith, let's go down 2. And let me just, a couple of the sort of noteworthy bills that we've been following that really have nothing to do with what we're doing as an organization, but you've probably seen are, you know, there's, in terms of just so that you're aware, I've listed a couple of them. HB 169 is an example of a lot of the COVID relief bills, specifically this dynamic between the governor's office and the legislature. And you'll see this, and you've seen this tension where the governor has been, you know, operating under emergency powers. The legislature wants to pull back those powers. They don't like what they can do. I mean, in Salt Lake County, we have, you know, this odd issue where you have, you know, bars can operate at 75% capacity, and yet Hale Center Theater is at 25% capacity, even though everyone there wears masks and they have a filtering system. I mean, it just doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And so the legislature is trying to iron out some of those things. SB 102, you know, police officers, in light of the riots, Black Lives Matters, and a lot of the other issues going on, you're seeing a number of bills this session that deal with training and implementation of things. In fact, there was a bill just yesterday that popped up, Representative King, that involved the peace officers having to bond. Anyway, HB 308 deals with vaccine amendments. There's a couple of bills dealing with vaccinations. One in particular, I think Representative Spendlove has a bill that specifically says that the government cannot force vaccinations. But what we're going to see at the front line of that whole issue is to what extent private organizations can. And right now, organizations like Intermountain Medical Center can do that, because to employees, but not necessarily to an individual coming in because they're a place of accommodation. And so legally speaking, you're going to see that tension, and that's going to be the frontline issue. Some other things like HB 348 and HB 92. Well, HB 348 completely restructures the Governor's Office of Economic Development, which is fascinating because one of the things we're seeing with Governor Cox is that he's making it really clear that he is not Governor Herbert 2.0. Once he was elected, he created a bunch of different groups to come in and say, okay, what are we going to do to make changes? And how do we structurally change things that aren't working? And he said, look, I'm not afraid to make big changes. And so he's gone through and he's made a number of them. And we're going to see a couple of, I'm going to go through another one shortly. So anyway, that's the example of some of the other ones. Oh, HB 92 deals with transgender surgery. And so those are the kind of issues you're going to see a lot in the press. A lot of our issues, not necessarily. Okay, let's go to the next one, Meredith.
I'm going to cut in. Why don't
Yeah.
we do another polling question? Because I know everyone is chomping at the bit for that.
And Meredith, let's go to the next slide as well. So what I'd like to do, this is one other bill that will affect us, is that it just popped up a day or two ago, Representative Ray. They're taking the Department of Human Services, the Department of Health, and they're just merging them. And then they're taking a piece of workforce services and including it in that bill. So, I mean, this is another example of a pretty substantial change that is going on right now. And so we're going to see a number of these, and it's refreshing when you have a new administration. They come in and they say, look, there's no sacred cows. What is it that works? What is it that doesn't work? And this is in response to some of the recommendations that they have received. And so the governor's moving forward with a number of pretty significant changes. Now, in terms of issues that specifically impact us, let's go to the next one. Thanks. You don't have to kind of read through this, but this gives you an example of, I mean, we have a sheet and that's a Google Doc that we maintain, and we continually update it with every bill that we think may have anything to do with our industry. And we sort of go through and and I'll talk about each of these here in a second, or the ones that kind of stick out. But just so you know, we're kind of managing them. You see that we have not only the title and description, who the sponsor is. In fact, if you look at a couple of those bills at the top, you see Representative Dunnigan and Bramble. Generally speaking, if Dunnigan and Bramble are the sponsors, it's because the bill itself was workshopped during the interim process. So if you remember when I talked about the interim process, there is an interim business and labor committee that meets all during the year. And that committee is comprised of all the House Business and Labor Committee members and the Senate Business and Labor Committee members. So pretty much the majority of the bills that we care about as an industry are going to be in that committee. And the interim committee is comprised of the House and Senate members all together. And then the co-chairs have been Representative Dunnigan and Senator Bramble. And at the end of that workshopping period, sometimes the committee has a bill that they've come up with that they like, and it's unanimous. And if that's the case and they pass it, then it doesn't even need a hearing in the body. It doesn't need to go to the House hearing. It goes just straight to the floor. So it sort of gets fast tracked. And so you'll see a couple of those bills at the top. HB 50 and HB 54 are both Dunnigan bills that are moving through. The first one, in fact, has already been sent to the governor. But anyway, I'll go through a couple of those. Let's go to the next slide, Meredith. And let me just kind of give you some ideas of some of these. I mean, HB 50, and this is one of those that that I just mentioned a few minutes ago. It's pretty complex, but it basically says the state risk manager can create captive insurance companies, and then it authorizes school district charters and a number of different state entities to participate in those organizations. Let's go to the next one. That gives you an idea of that one, and so at 54. We support, and currently it's circled on the floor. This is one of those bills that we sometimes call them cleanup bills, but I just put this up because this short description of what it does at the top, which is usually just a line or two, this is incredibly long, and that's the short description. And it's even longer than what I've captured here. And every year there will be sort of this overall kind of update to the insurance code. And that's what this does. Okay, next one. We've got this this Children's Health Insurance Plan bill. This is HB 292, and it adds treatment for autism spectrum disorder to the panoply of benefits. And one of the things that we watch carefully, and I mean, I'm sure Ernie will talk about this more, but we watch carefully any of these mandate bills. Anytime there's a bill that says we now, you have to cover X, Y, or Z, we keep a close eye on those because, as you know, that has a real impact on costs. And even things like autism. I mean, autism, treatment for autism, as you know, is very, it's individualized. It requires humans. It's costly. And so those are the kinds of things, that we're watching. It's in Health and Human Services of this particular bill. Next one. This is another one, SB 158, that creates a lot of times pilot programs. Whenever you see pilot program, we see a lot of these, and pilot program basically means that the sponsor of the bill has this idea that they'd really like to see it go somewhere, but they know that there isn't the support. In this case, it's Senator Escamilla. This is her bill, trying to enroll more children. It deals with Medicaid and CHIP and expanding Medicaid. Knows that, it's using a media campaign to get more children involved. When you see pilot program, it basically means she doesn't have the support to get it through. She knows it, but if she creates a pilot program, her hope, of course, is that it will serve to kind of show what it is that the program could do. And ideally, it's usually done to lay the groundwork for support at some point in the future or something similar. So that's where that is. And in fact, I think that the bill is, it's currently in Senate rules and has been for a little bit. And if you remember my discussion of what the Rules Committee does, if a bill is in Senate rules and it's been there for a while, a lot of times that gives you an indication of the level of support. And this is one, because of the Medicaid expansion was such a hot button issue a couple of years ago. This is one that is likely to be a hot button as well. Okay, next one, Meredith. This is SB 41 is more. So this is also Senator Escamilla, and it's passed the Senate, it passed the House, has been sent back for a concurring vote. It basically says health benefit plans need to reimburse for telehealth services if the kind of mental health service provided is the sort of thing that can be done via telehealth. And so if, the kind of therapy or whatever kind of service is provided, the idea is assuming that the standard of care can be met via telehealth, then it mandates coverage, and, rather than saying it's got to be in person. So this is one that Senator Escamilla has that we're likely to see as a law soon. Okay, next one, Meredith. Another one, directing Department of Health, HB 363. This is Representative Ward. And by the way, remember when I talked a little bit about subject matter experts? This is another example of a subject matter expert. Representative Ward is a physician. And so a lot of times he will sponsor legislation specific to his profession because he's aware of what it does. I see we're kind of getting close to the end. So Meredith, can you go down to where it says no surprises? Let's go down one more. Yeah, and so let's go up one more, go back one more. So we watch kind of state legislation in tandem with the federal legislation as well. And this is something Tanji mentioned, but I just want to reiterate that this No Surprises Act was one of the final major pieces of legislation President Trump signed at the end of December. She talked about it briefly, so I won't go into too many of the specific details, but I will mention the fact that it doesn't go into effect until January 1 of next year. It was a pretty significant compromise on a number of fronts from individuals who in the different committee members in the Senate, and so let's go down two really quick, let's go down one more. Okay, so this is just, the map just showed you that there were states, and actually go back one. Yeah, so if you look at that map, those are the states prior to the federal legislation that had balanced billing protection. We were not one of them. A number of states had a partial one. A lot of them had comprehensive protections. But as we mentioned, this is a big deal because this now extends, I mean, under the Consolidated Appropriations Act, it applies to 135 million people who have these plans nationwide. It's comprehensive health care, the grandfather, the non-grandfather, the self-insured, non-self-insured. I mean, while it doesn't apply to kind of the short-term benefits, it does, it applies to a lot of the longer care stuff, the post-stabilization services, that sort of thing. And so you'll want to work with your clients to make sure that they understand these implications, but knowing as well that the next 6 months and the rulemaking is going to have a lot to do with how this actually rolls out. So Meredith, am I at the end? Do I have any? Go down one more. Keep going. And there's one other Supreme Court case that has some implications for the healthcare system. Is the Rutledge case. The Supreme Court just decided this in December. And this dealt with whether states can regulate the insurance plans and specifically under ERISA. And so this is one of those things that may fall under the radar for the average person. But there's always been this question about whether states can regulate plans if they deal with cost regulations. And this was, Arkansas had a MAC law, and this dealt specifically with the MAC law. And the question was, because it's part of ERISA, can states do it, or is it trumped by the federal legislation? And surprisingly, the Supreme Court said, no, the states can do this. And so now it's opened up sort of this Pandora's box of, okay, what can they regulate and what qualifies as cost regulation? And so as you can imagine, the PBMs are very concerned about this. And in fact, Senator Vickers, who is a member of the Senate here in Utah and is a pharmacist, has a bill specifically dealing with these kinds of issues. So anyway, just want to bring that to your attention because that will have a pretty significant impact from a regulation standpoint on possibly healthcare costs, but more specifically, to what degree the state can actually regulate plans. Because what they're trying to do now in this particular piece of legislation is extend it to the self-insured plans. And we may see some litigation on that. Okay, go down one more, Meredith. And I think this is sort of the end of my presentations, but 2 weeks from Friday is the end of our legislative session here in Utah. And we will keep busy with you. We will be burning the midnight oil. We'll be working with Ernie, Carl, and the legislative team. And we'll sort of be mindful of any of these bills. I mean, a lot of the ones that are on that sort of list that I showed you, you'll probably see a third to a half of them that may pass. The others just may not go anywhere, or maybe they're good bills, but time just runs out. And if it doesn't pass by midnight on the last night, it really is, it's done, it's over. So on that note, Ernie, are there any questions?
There are a couple of questions. They're kind of coming in. One of them, you talked a little bit about the mandate bills. And
yes.
Instead of seeing mandate bills, we're seeing study bills instead. We're seeing bills where instead of coming out with an out and out mandate, we're seeing a study and then something that could potentially become a mandate. Can you talk a little bit about that process and what we're trying to watch in that area?
Yeah, I mean, and as I mentioned, those studies or the pilot programs are generally an indication that the sponsor of the bill would like to do something, but knows they don't have the support. And so, in fact, when I served on the Business and Labor Committee, the very last committee hearing of the session that we had was generally, in fact, one session, it was like 5 different bills dealing with mandates. And they all dealt with mandates for coverage of specific types of illnesses. And they were kind of saved till the end because the answer was no. And what happens, of course, is that you'll get sort of one of the things the legislature does is they want to know what's the fiscal impact of this thing? How much is this going to cost? And how much, we're always mindful of how much it's going to cost the health insurance plans, and what the rates, what are your premiums going to do? And so these pilot programs or studies mean, okay, we know it's going to cost money. We know it's going to increase rates. We know there isn't the support to do it. But if we can do a pilot program or a study then maybe, and then mandate that they do whatever study, you know, Department of Health does a study. It will usually include language that says by January or July 1 of the following year, they need to do a report to the Interim Health and Human Services Committee. And as part of that report, they'll talk about their study, what they found. And then at that point, I think the sponsor usually hopes that they'll have enough sort of backing to then introduce a bill that says, hey, the pilot program showed that, you know, it would only cost X amount, or, you know, yes, it would cost a lot, but the benefits would outweigh the cost, and then they'll move towards legislation. So anyway, that's why even if something says it's a pilot program, we do watch it very carefully.
Okay, well, thank you very much, Derek. There is another question related to CHIP, just so you know. I will ask that question, but I'm going to save that one for Representative Dunnigan.
Perfect.
All right. We have a couple of great videos for you. We are going to attempt to play those now, and hopefully we have better success than our first attempt. So I would say take that away.
Thank you for participating in Utah Association of Health Underwriters Day on the Hill for 2021. Normally, we would all be here together and we would be at the Capitol, but because of the new COVID requirements, we're doing things virtual or blended, which is an absolute new experience for all of us. But again, would like to welcome you here and hope you found ways to participate in our session. We've allowed our sessions to open up, and hopefully if you have questions in committee rooms, you're able to attend either in person or virtually and to be able to get your issues heard. Utah has, I think, a great economy because of a lot of things, but one of the reasons why is because of our regulatory environment. I think we've done very well over the years in trying to manage our affairs and to try to protect the public, but also to be able to do business. You may be aware that Utah for 13 years in a row has been rated the best economic outlook by Rich States for State, which is a publication that looks at our regulatory and tax policy and predicts the economic validity of the states. And again, not only have they predicted Utah as one of the best states in the nation for economic activity, we've actually accomplished that. And as we come out of this pandemic, we've done lots of things to be able to maintain to actually take care of two things. Number one is protect lives, and we know how important it is to protect lives because of the pandemic, but also to protect livelihoods. We've given liability protection to businesses as they come out and actually employ people. We did that, one of the first states in the nation to actually do that. And that what we've done here has been a model for other states. We've done things historically that have protected our, again, the ability to function as a business. We're a contract state. We've done so many other things that I think give us a competitive advantage as we allow businesses to thrive in Utah. I appreciate your participation this year. Appreciate you being with us. I look forward to the time that we can not only talk virtually, and I can have more interaction than a Zoom call or a video meeting, but look forward to seeing all of you once again in person. Thanks for all you do for this great state. You're on the front lines, and you see so many things. You keep Utah doing very well. You keep Utah, what I think is the #1 state, not only economically, but for quality of life. And so thank you for participating, and it's great to spend a few minutes with you today. Thank you.
If you didn't already know, that is President Stuart Adams. Really fortunate to have him speak to us in a time that we don't have a chance to sit down and interact with our legislators as we have in past years. We also have a video from Speaker of the House Brad Wilson that we're queuing up right now for you, and I think this just really speaks to the fact that our lobbyist, you've already seen how knowledgeable he is and what a good get he was for us and having her represent us. has really good connections in the legislature. So go ahead.
Hi, my name is Brad Wilson. I'm currently Speaker of the Utah House of Representatives, and I'm sad that we're actually not able to be in person this year for this event that you have. But I want you to know how much I look forward to getting together next year and doing this in person. I also want to thank you for the great work that you do on behalf of Utahns. I actually spent the first decade of my career in your industry and know firsthand the difference that you make on individual lives and really helping small businesses navigate an important issue for each of them. You're really important for us here at the Capitol as well. We rely heavily on you and your advice and your thoughtful input as we craft legislation that affects this policy space around insurance and business and making sure we're taking care of Utahns. So I want to personally thank Carl Rostenberg for his efforts leading your association, and also Ernie Sweat for helping interface with lawmakers as we go about the important policy work here at the state of Utah. Thank you for your participation in this event, and I hope everyone has a prosperous and great year. Thank you.
Thank you very much to both of those leaders in our legislature for joining us today. And I would like to go ahead and turn things over to John Clark. John is our incoming president, and he has a message for you on HUPAC.
Thanks, Ernie. I wanted to mention some things about HUPAC. That's our state political action committee that we raise dollars on. There's actually two PACs. There's a federal PAC that some of you may contribute to. That's used at a federal level by NAHU, but I'm specifically talking today about our state PAC for UAHU. There's a form on the screen. Many of you have seen that. That's how the majority of our members that are donating to HUPAC contribute. It's a monthly credit card deduction. There is also a link on our website that you can now use to donate to HUPAC as well. So whichever is most convenient for you. Justin Bendler is our HUPAC chair for our association, and we're grateful for his help. With these HUPAC dollars that we generate, we're able to support members of the legislature that are like-minded like us and support issues that are important to us. And we're thankful in this last election cycle, we were able to support one of our own, Jim Dunnigan, in his re-election effort. We do support legislators from both sides of the aisle. Again, those that we feel that are supportive of our issues of market-based solutions, and we're always, mandates were mentioned by Derek. We sometimes we're very concerned when we hear about any kind of mandate coming up, and so this helps us in our efforts. HUPAC gives us a seat at the table. It helps us have our voice heard. And so supporting HUPAC is very important, and it's really vital at this time that we grow it. So there's about 50 of us donating to HUPAC on a regular basis each month, and we could certainly use more of you and more of us to increase that effort. Let's see. Again, we're grateful for those that do support us, and again, use that form if that's convenient for you, or you can just go online and contribute to HUPAC directly through an online portal. So we appreciate your support, and hopefully you'll consider donating. Thanks. Hey,
John, can you talk to us a little bit about what what are some of the roles that we serve as far as helping legislators, legislators who are friendly to our industry? What kind of a role do we serve as far as helping to keep them in office, and what kind of a role do we serve as far as helping those individuals who are trying to get into the legislature that this might be the first thing for them, but we consider them to be friendly to our industry?
Yeah, so we're able to determine those legislators that are like-minded like us and support market-based solutions. And in years past, we've been able to donate to help their campaigns. Also, we've been able to participate in going door to door and hanging the flyers or knocking doors and in a district or and reaching out to their constituents, letting them know that they're running. A lot of times it's just leaving a door hanger, but it takes boots on the ground to do that, and we've been able to help with those efforts.
Okay. Well, thanks for your time, John. And we are hoping that individuals who are not currently participating in the program will certainly do so. As I mentioned to you, all of you previously, what happens in the state level is so important. And the fact that we have a PAC, it's not like we're buying votes for legislators. That doesn't happen. But the fact that we do have the ability to support them, I mean, of course, everybody, especially if you're in the House of Representatives, you're running for re-election all the time. These guys are desperate for help, and we do have the ability to support those people who do see things the way that we do, and there are a few of them. Okay. I'm going to see if we can get Janine Ashley to join us right now. Hopefully she can. We are waiting on Representative Dunnigan to come on, and we haven't seen him yet. So Janine, are you ready? Okay, sounds like she is. So go ahead and just so you know, Janine is our Public Service Vice Chair, and she assists us in helping out with the 4th Street Clinic. So we'll go ahead and hand things over to her.
Hi, Ernie. I'm just making sure that everyone can hear me.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Now we can't, Janine. We've lost you. I think you're on mute. Janine, we still can't hear you. Okay, if everybody will just hang on. Dunnigan is coming on, so we will go ahead and have an opportunity to introduce him. Okay, Janine, we'll come back to you. Representative Dunnigan was a little bit late in logging in, but he's logging in right now, so he'll be joining us here shortly. All right, so and I see him. There he is. He's got his mask on. Hey, thanks for joining us, Jim. Just to tell you a little bit about him, back in 2003, we were fortunate enough to get a new representative in District 39 in Taylorsville. This was an individual that actually helped to organize that city. Didn't know if you knew that. And on the initial city council, served on that. And after following that, he was able to join us in the legislature. It was kind of an interesting time. I remember when Jim actually came into the legislature, we had a couple of people that came from the insurance industry, but Jim was the first one that actually was a member of the health underwriters and kind of understood our side of things. And, I'm just really, we're just really fortunate to have him and have had him spend as many years as he has. We're talking about not only one of the best legislators that we have in the House right now. Many people, this is not just coming from me. You ask any of the members of the House that have worked with this individual, they'll tell you one of the best legislators that we've ever had in the state of Utah. And just once again, happens to be in my home district and happens to be joining us here today. I'm just going to run through really quick few things about Jim. He serves as the chair of the Utah Health Reform Task Force, chair of the Legislative Process Committee, chair of the Political Subdivision Committee. He serves on the National Conference of State Legislatures, and he chairs their Health and Human Services Committee. He's a member of the Council of the State Governments of Health Committees. He serves on the Workers' Comp Advisory Council. He serves on the Children's Health Insurance Board. And by the way, this is still somebody who runs a health insurance agency. So all of us on the board are still trying to figure out how you do that, Jim. In addition to that, he's the NFIB's Small Business Champion. He's a friend of the Utah Taxpayers Association. He also volunteers, something you probably don't know. He's a volunteer clergy for the Oxbow Jail. He helps people with addiction issues kind of clean things up. He also helps transition them into normal life, so to speak, after they leave. He has a BS in business management from the UAHU. And one more thing I'll tell you about Jim before I hand it over to him. You want this guy on your volleyball team. His volleyball team just won the gold medal, or the most recent Huntsman Games. So Jim, take it away.
Ernie, that is terrific. Thank you very much. I hope we have that recorded. I want to play that to my wife, so I appreciate that a lot. So it's great to be with you. Sorry to be a little late. We had a committee meeting that ran over and the snow kind of got us started just a little bit late, but it's great to be with my fellow underwriters. So we are in the 5th week in the session, the 5th to 7th. So we've got roughly 3 weeks, a little bit less to go. And we'll put together about a $20+ billion budget and pass probably close to 500 laws and bills, although many of those are updates to existing law. They're not brand new laws. There's always a lot of insurance stuff, always. And one of the things that I keep my eye on are health insurance mandates. And, my colleagues here in the legislature are really good about having somebody else, meaning the insurance plans, pay for some coverage that they think they should pay for. And so I'm always doing interference and education with my colleagues and saying, this just drives the cost up. And something that's very telling is not that many years ago, I used to be able to tell people, I'd show them a pie chart of the health insurance market in Utah, and roughly 1/3 were fully insured, 1/3 was large employer, and 1/3 was government, like Medicare, Medicaid, TRICARE, et cetera, and the uninsured. But now, from about 1/3 of the marketplace for the fully insured commercial plans, we're down to about 22% in just the last few years. And that's partly because of these mandates that we heap on the commercial insurers. And a mandate is something that the legislature passes that says the commercial insurance plan has to cover it or has to provide the benefit. And they tend to increase the cost. And so we have more and more employers, and this as the brokers, they're going to the level funded plans or those ERISA type plans where they can escape state regulation, because the state has the ability only to regulate fully insured plans, the commercial plans. But some of my colleagues will say, I don't care, at least it's a start if we can get 22% to do what we want. But we had one just come up recently where they for a cancer patient, they want the health plans to pay for the extraction of the egg or for eggs or sperm, and to freeze it. So after cancer treatment, a person could then have those reproductive items implanted or used to, have children. And it's a wonderful thing and a noble thing, but the question is, should the health plans pay for it? And so we had another one to require the health plans to cover in vitro treatment. And, and there are some plans that cover it. My feeling is that's their choice. That should be their choice. But typically we'll have a constituent, they'll go to a legislator and say, I have this health condition or this, or I need this special food and I want my health insurance to cover it. So I'm constantly working on that. And we heard just recently in committee, the one about freezing and having the health plans pay for the frozen egg or sperm so that it can be there when the cancer survivor that wants to use it. And I talked to the bill sponsor and I said, look, let's run this through Medicaid, because then the state has to step up and decide if we're going to pay our share of it, instead of just layering this on the commercial market. Well, we don't provide any funding. We just tell them you have to do it. And he agreed to that, to get my support. He agreed to that. And so that's the version that passed committee. But there are all sorts of items that raise costs. Something else I'm working on is I'm sponsoring the department bill for the insurance department. There's a lot of cleanup stuff in there and some policy changes. And it impacts all lines of insurance. And I hope to present that this afternoon in the House. There's some things that's touching on life insurance that I know some of you, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, because I know you're the health underwriters, but a lot of you will also put in a group life plan. And when a group life plan terminates, the question is, what conversion options does the policyholder have? And often you can convert to a whole life product, or you can port it and take it to a group. Well, not a group, but you can continue that group life, but on port it and keep it on an individual basis. The Utah's Attorney General, I think, gave a ruling, I can't remember, a couple of years ago, that said, no, you can't really do that with these types of conversion plans that we have. And so the insurance department is kind of putting a kibosh on allowing group life to be converted or ported. And I know this comes up only occasionally, but it's important if somebody has a group life plan and they want to continue it. So I have legislation in here. I've been working with the American Council of Life Insurers as well as the department, and we come up to a negotiated agreement where we'll be able to continue to port those group life plans, but not plans like the credit union plan or something like that you no longer remember the credit union. So I think we've landed in a good spot there. There are always, or often I should say, questions about association health plans, and I've been working with the department on the proper structure and when to allow association plans and to provide some flexibility. And by the way, I might say I enjoy working with the insurance department. We have a new commissioner that I expect you're aware of, Commissioner Pike, but to have a good relationship with the department. They're always very open and very willing to work with me. And hold on just a second. Yeah. So we're voting. I just have to indicate my votes, which I just did. So things are lively. Just a little bit about the Capitol. The first week that we started, the Capitol was closed to the public. The Capitol's been closed for almost a year, since mid-March of last year, when COVID just started to really come alive at the end of our last session. So our intent was to open the Capitol to the public the mid-January when we started. But then we had some, the protests and so forth. So we, out of abundance for safety, the Capitol was closed to the public that first week. But we've been open every week since. There are not very many people that come here. If you're interested, there's actually parking available this year for two reasons. Not very many people are coming. And also we have moved 700 employees from working on the Capitol complex out to a newly acquired state office building in Taylorsville. So there is parking if you want to come up and kind of watch the show where you need to wear a mask, and they test me with the rapid COVID test. I have to get tested twice a week. Our interns get tested daily, but we're up here, we've adopted a base budget, basically last year's budget plus some adjustments. So if for some reason we're forced to adjourn because of COVID, then we'll be able to, we'll have our budget in place. We do have a couple of legislators. We have one who's a 42-year-old male. He runs marathons. He got COVID just when the session started. He's been in intensive care with a tube ever since. And then we have another one that's just coming out of the hospital. So it's just nasty. It can affect some people mildly, some people severely. But I think I'll stop for a minute. There's a couple more other things I can talk about, and just see if there are any questions. I don't see any in the chat, but Ernie, are there any specific things that you'd like me to address?
We did get a question during Derek Brown's presentation that I saved for you, and it had to do with CHIP. Are we going to allow other carriers to participate in CHIP?
So CHIP is a Children's Health Insurance Plan, and I actually sponsored that bill to open. It used to be insured by Public Employees Health Plan, PHPs. A number of years ago, I sponsored legislation to open it up to other carriers. And so it goes up for bid. The answer is yes, it goes up for bid. And my law requires that at least 2 carriers bid on it or be awarded. And if you don't get 2, then they have to have 1, and then the other one turns out the default is PEHP. So yes, CHIP goes out for bid. I believe it's like every 3 years or something like that. And commercial carriers can bid on that.
We had another question come up. This is kind of a long question, but it's a taxation question. We assisted dozens of clients in obtaining a PPP loan, and many have raised some concerns. The federal government and the Consolidated Reconciliation Bill passed this past December has determined that expenses are deductible. Sorry, I got to move this out of the way. The expenses are deductible and the forgiven loan will not be taxed as income. Indications are that the state of Utah will be taxing the forgiven PPP loans. Is there any talk on the Hill for Utah not taxing these forgiven PPP loans?
Okay, so I understand the issue, and the tax commission has opined that the person is already getting the deduction for the expenses, and that they're using the PPP loan to pay, and so that they should not, so that they should be taxed on that money, because then they get to take a deduction for the expenses. And the federal government, of course, is determined not to tax it. My own, and I understand the tax commission says that it would be double dipping if the state allowed people to not count the PPP loan as taxable income. And I understand that. However, personally, I think that our state should not tax the PPP loan. And unfortunately, the federal government is not, and our state's 4.95, so it'll be a lesser amount. But still, that could be a fair amount of money. So just yesterday in the House Republican caucus, this issue was brought up. And there was some pushback by representatives who said, no, it's double dipping if you get money that comes tax-free and then you get to take the deduction. However, rather than complicate our tax structure even more than it is and divorce from the federal government's position, I personally feel that we should not tax the PPP amount. So to answer the question right now, the position is we are going to tax it, but we're having a discussion on that, and it's too early to see if that will gain any momentum.
So where are we in the process for that particular legislation? Is it?
So there is no legislation not to exempt it from tax right now, and so there's still time. And this is what I would say. This is something that could help. So if you underwriters contact your legislator, and assuming you don't want it to be taxed, if you want it to be taxed, then just keep quiet. But if you don't want it to be taxed, contact your legislator. And if they can start hearing from some people that they know that because of COVID and because of burden this is placed on burden or on businesses, we shouldn't be taxing it. At least if that's how you feel. And of course, I'm just kidding. Contact them and let them know if you think it should be taxed. But contact them so we can start building some momentum, because they need to hear from some constituents. So hopefully you know who your representative is and your senator. I would contact them.
Okay, another question. This has to do with balance billing. Of course, we know about the No Surprises Act that's coming out of that's coming out of DC, and Tangi talked to us a little bit about this. And then we know that there's also a bill that's been proposed by, I believe it's Karen Maine. Will this have any effect on what commonly happens in the ER room or anesthesiologists?
So I have not seen Senator Maine's bill. What does that do? Ernie, have you looked at it?
It's so new, we haven't had a chance to review it yet. So I wasn't sure if you had any information on it.
She worked on a bill last year that passed. It just required some reporting or something like that. So as I looked at the federal bill, finally the feds did something. You know, they're doing the arbitration model. And frankly, it's not as strong as I hoped it would be. And I've worked on balance billing legislation for a number of years, which has been a huge battle here with the help of the underwriters. I think it will have an effect on what commonly happens. And I think it's going to take the insured out of the middle, and it's broader. The piece I was working on was just in the ER. This extends in a network facility if you are treated by a non-network provider. So that's broader, and the issue is broader. So I like that. And I think it will have a positive effect in the ER room. And as anesthesiologist answer Carl's question, but even beyond that, I think it will take a little bit of time once it gets started to see how the arbitration goes, to see what the net benefit is. The National Hospital Change and the National Medical Association were able to weaken it, in my opinion, but still I think it's going to end up being a useful tool. But it's going to take some arbitration to see how we really end up on that. It's definitely a step in the right direction.
Okay, another question that's come through. What about the 6055 reporting? It's requiring our 1094s and 1095s. We know that the tax, the individual mandate's gone away, but we still have companies that are having to file these forms, and employers hate it, brokers hate it, CPAs hate it. Do you see this reporting going away, or anything we can do on the state level?
So I feel your pain. I share your pain. I hate those forms as bad as anybody. It's ridiculous. It's terrible. There's nothing that I'm aware of that we can do on a state level. Believe me, if we could, I would do it. And it's a federal requirement with no legal room for state flexibility that I'm aware of. It's a federal issue. It's just, I know it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And that's not a good answer, or I don't know, it's not a hopeful answer, but I don't know how to get rid of it absent Congress doing that.
Another balance billing question. So knowing that we do have a federal bill coming through, and this question was actually posed to Tangi earlier, do you feel that we do need legislation on the state level to deal with some of these nightmare issues we have with people who've just had these major claims in the emergency room and ambulances? Or do we feel like the federal legislation is going to fix things for us?
I'm hopeful that the federal legislation will fix things. And I've heard from dozens and dozens and dozens of people have these nightmare cases, and they continue to go on. And we are having some success with the carriers and getting them together. I'm working on one right now, and generally have some success with that. But I can't do all these on one-offs. We have to have a policy. So I think that the federal government, which is talking about addressing surprise billing for some years, and they tried to get it in earlier stimulus packages and they failed. They actually got it passed So I think it's going to take the insured largely out of the middle, and then it's going to be the provider and the health plans that duke it out with the arbitrator. But I think it will take once it's implemented, it will take the insured out of the middle. I think it will. We'll see. I believe it will.
And Jim, just one last question, and thank you again for your time. I know that you have some bills that you've got in the legislature right now. Is there anything that you would like to discuss with us? Maybe some things we can help support for you with our local legislators.
So one of the things I'm doing, so I'll mention just a couple. And one is that you brought up CHIP, or somebody did. I have legislation that would add an autism benefit to CHIP, the Children's Health Insurance Plan. The problem we have right now is Medicaid will provide autism treatment, and Medicaid goes up to 138% of poverty. But if you have a family and their income starts going above that, and they have an autistic child, they know that if they earn above 138% of poverty, they're going to lose Medicaid and then go to CHIP. And so some of them will purposefully only work 4 days a week or less so that they can maintain the income level required to be on Medicaid. It's counterproductive because we want people to succeed. We want them to get off Medicaid and progress. And so I'm proposing to add autism treatment to CHIP, which covers low-income families' children from 138% of poverty up to 200%. So we don't have this disincentive to stay on Medicaid. Eventually, we want them to get up to CHIP, and then we want them to expand beyond that and get into the commercial market. So I'm working on that. One other one I'll mention. I am working on, so a lot of you probably sell dental insurance, so I should maybe mention my dental bill. So the dentists came to me, the National Dental Association and the Utah Dental Association, and they don't think they're being paid fairly or appropriately by some dental plans. They say they'll go in, a dentist will go in and do 3 or 4 procedures, and the dental plan will just pay for one. Or another issue is a dentist will sign up for a network with a dental plan, and then that dental plan will lease their network to a different dental plan, and the dentist may end up on 5 or 6 or 7 dental plans just from agreeing to sign up for one, and they want to be able to get out, particularly as their business grows, and they want to have some flexibility. So I've been meeting with the Dental Association as well as many of the dental plans, and they're not in perfect alignment, but we've come up with some agreement to have better transparency on EOBs, and also allow some dentists to opt out of a network, and the dental plans are going to have to keep their dental network and the networks that they lease out in an online format and updated quarterly. So to the broker, the changes that you'll see is maybe some change in how the EOB looks with just a little more transparency. There's another issue that some of the dental plans prohibit the dentist from billing for uncovered services. I mean, let's say that you have a procedure that's not covered by your dental insurance, but that you want to go ahead and have it done. And a minor example is a silver filling versus a white composite filling. There are some dental plans that the employer chooses to only cover the amalgam silver fillings. But what if the patient wants to pay the difference and have the white composite filling? So there are a strict reading of the current law, and the contracts can say, no, the dental plan should just deny that. And the dentist is saying, look, if the patient wants to pay the difference, we should let them. So we're doing some minor things. It becomes more dollar significant when it's a crown, and the patient may want to have a different type of crown than other than their dental plan allowed. So that's something I'm working on. One other thing I'll mention, you might find this interesting, in medical respite. So the chronically homeless, we have folks in Utah that are homeless. And when they need medical care, they go to the ER. And this impacts you because this impacts your rates, your health plan rates, potentially, and that it drives up uncompensated care. And we know that the commercial plans end up paying a bunch of that. So we have homeless individuals, and they use the ER as a walk-in clinic, which is a very expensive way to do those or to get care. and the ER stabilizes them. They release the homeless person. And then within a few days, the homeless person's back in the ER, just cranking up this uncompensated care that's then pushed onto the commercial plans. Or sometimes they're kept in the hospital for a couple of days and the hospital stabilizes them, and then the hospital is faced with either we keep them inpatient, which is very expensive to do, or we release them back to the street and we know we're going to see them back in the ER in 2 or 3 days because we really haven't solved their underlying long-term condition. So what my bill does is request the federal government to let us put these folks on Medicaid and create a pilot program for medical respite. So medical respite is a facility, visualize a skilled nursing facility, not quite that high level, but they provide meals, they help them with their daily activities, they provide medical care. And so it works this way. The chronically homeless person goes to the ER stabilizes them, they call the respite and they say, will you come and get, so-and-so, and the respite takes them, they provide the place, the facility for them to live, their meals, and they help them get stabilized for 2 weeks or longer. And then they try to get them to a resource center and have a stable place to live. Same thing for the hospital. The hospital, after they stabilize the homeless person, instead of releasing them to the street, they call the medical respite facility, and the medical respite takes them and they treat them at a much, much lower cost than inpatient. So this has passed the House. I'm waiting for it to pass the Senate. The federal government has to give approval. And it involves getting these folks Medicaid and then giving them longer term care at a much lower cost than what we're doing now. It impacts the underwriters because if we can stop some of the uncompensated care from going in the ER, that will help what's driving up some of our commercial rates.
Well, Jim, once again, appreciate your time. I'm happy to tell you that we do have the Capitol Rotunda reserved for our traditional Day on the Hill next year, assuming that this pandemic will be behind us and we can get together in person again. But I know you're super busy. Thanks for joining us, and appreciate all your service to the state.
Thank you very much, and you guys have a good day.
Thanks. All right. I would like to introduce again Janine Ashley. Apologize for putting you on the spot before, Janine. Thanks for sharing some things about the 4th Street Clinic, and I'll let you take it away.
Thank you, Ernie. I hope everyone's having a great day. We're snowed in right now, but I think the day's going really great. In giving back to the community, UAHU has chosen the 4th Street Clinic as our local community charity. The 4th Street Clinic is located about 409 West, 400 South in downtown Salt Lake. If you drive by, you'll see their sign on the corner. Through the pandemic, they have remained open, and they do serve our homeless community. Some things that the 4th Street Clinic does is they're a nonprofit organization, and they help the community they help the homeless with medical, mental health, substance abuse, dental, and prescriptions. The demographic in the community, the 4th Street Clinic has treated around 4,500 patients this last year. They've completed about 4,600 COVID tests, and they filled about over 20,000 prescriptions. About 44% of the community, the homeless community, is living in shelters, where 12% are living on the streets. When talking to the director, she has said it's been a rough road this past year, with expenses going up to about 32%. It's taking about twice as many people to make things happen. It's already been a hard job, but COVID has made it even harder. We think we have it rough by working at home. Their employees are actually working out of tents because they can't bring them into the facility. So they have about 8 tents set up right now, which they have their doctors out there charting. They're taking them in for COVID tests. Others are doing health assessments, and their dental is starting again. They do have dental services, which they are taking them in for that, mostly on emergencies, which most of them are emergencies. and they're trying their best to stay functioning for the community, because this is a community, and especially during this time where it's very cold outside, it's very needed that they're there to help them. Because they are a federally qualified health center, they do have access to the COVID vaccinations, which they are following the health policies of staying at 70 plus to distribute those right now. Unfortunately, most of the homeless community doesn't live until that age of 70. So right now they are distributing it to other clients, which so maybe those that are on that have different needs, higher needs for their health. It has been harder for them because they do have to come back for a second shot. And so they're doing a lot of case management, which is taking even more time, increasing their testing and supplies. And they're doing a lot of coordination now with the other homeless shelters, because once the COVID test is administered, they might have to talk with the shelters to make sure that maybe that person can stay a few more days, because unlike us, we can get the COVID test and come home and not feel very well, but we still have things at our home that can, you know, help us feel better. Where them, if they're out on the streets, it is harder for them to get feeling better. So they are coordinating a lot with other shelters, which is taking more time and more people. For right now, they have tried to stay on top of everything, and with our money, with our donations, our tax deductible donations, everything helps. The 4th Street Clinic's passionate what they do, and they provide services to the community. Biggest thing they provide is hope. Hope is what people need to know that they can have a healthy and happy and productive life. And the 4th Street Clinic does that for their employees. When working with them, I know that they are passionate about their jobs. They really want to take care of the community. And that is why most of their employees are working out in tents. They don't have a lot of money to, they have given their employees vouchers to get their coat and some snow boots, but for the most part, they do rely on us to take care, to help with our donations to keep this going. If you guys have any questions, Laurel is amazing at the clinic, so you can reach out to her. And also, I just encourage everyone to please donate on our UAHU. We have a link for the 4th Street Clinic. Anything will help. Anything from $5, you know, to whatever you can afford is very much appreciated. And if you have any questions, I'm always available. My name is Janine Ashley, and please let me know, because I love this clinic. I love working with them, and they've just been a pleasure.
Thank you very much, Janine, and appreciate all the service that you provide to our association. All right, it is time to introduce our final speaker in our second hour of continuing education. Many of you have had the opportunity to hear from John Green in the past. He's done a tremendous amount of work for our National Association. He's actually been with the National Association since 2000, serving as a lobbyist. And right now he's the Vice President of Congressional Affairs. Prior to that, worked for the state of Maryland as a health policy analyst. And he's been in the middle of all the major legislation, certainly during, my career, going from HIPAA and Obamacare, was heavily involved in the 2005 Deficit Reduction Act, which expanded long-term care policies to many states. He's was a member of the Senate Mental Health Parity Negotiating Team couple of achievements I want to point out to John about John before I hand it over to him. He was able to get bipartisan support. That does happen at times in Washington, D.C., to remove the $2,000 deductible cap on small group plans. That was a huge deal that many of us didn't even know about. He was able to get legislation passed to restore the Medicare open enrollment period to the pre-ACA timeframes. He has a master's in health services from George Washington University, lives in Rockville, Maryland. A couple things I'll tell you about John that most of you probably don't know. He is an avid collector of political memorabilia, including all those buttons that you see. And his kids are also artists. He has a son who's in a rock band, and he has a daughter who is a ballerina. So thanks for joining us, John. I'm going to hand it over to you.
All right, thank you. It's great to be with you guys. A lot going on here in Washington, believe it or not. While we're all working from home, we are actually a lot happening on Capitol Hill. And so do you want to put up my slides, or did you want me to pull them up? Or if you have them, could you throw them up for me? Here we go. Okay, so I'm going to talk a little bit about reconciliation. I think it's important because a lot of the healthcare issues that we all are concerned about will likely turn up in reconciliation bills. And so I just want you to kind of understand that process and how it works, and get into a little nitty gritty about it. Next slide, please. All right, so the politics of the Congress now, the votes in both the House and the Senate are very, very close, probably the most narrow since about the 1890s. When you consider that it's 50-50 basically in the Senate, and just a few votes separate Democrats and Republicans in the House. Only a few times that it's been this evenly divided, and the last time in 2001, they forged a power sharing agreement that lasted for 5 months until Senator Jeffords moved to caucus with the Democrats. But we have the same arrangement today between Majority Leader Schumer and Minority Leader McConnell, as we did in 2001. So what does that mean? So the next slide, please. You can go to the next slide. Thank you. So committee assignments are evenly divided in the Senate between Dems and Rs, equal office space and budgets. Usually when one party is in complete control, there's a massive swap of space. There are a lot of coveted cubby holes in the Capitol that whoever's in control likes to take over, but right now it's an equal sharing. They have agreed not to fill the amendment tree, which is a tactic to block consideration of issues by making, essentially providing poison pills that will mean that maybe a good bill doesn't get the opportunity for consideration. Either party could serve as presiding officer, though I don't expect to see Mr. Schumer giving that up. But that's the agreement between the two leaders. Next slide. So what does this mean? Well, for legislation that has bipartisan support, but opposed by a majority of Republicans, will now get a vote, because there have been a number of issues that have come up where Republicans would have sided with Democrats, and now I suppose they'll get that opportunity to do that. So let's see. The filibuster is, and I'll talk about that a little bit more too, but it will take at least 10 Republicans to overcome a filibuster because, as you know, bills require 60 votes to pass. Next slide. Now, Democrats are still in charge in the Senate, and that means at the committee level, they can decide when hearings will be scheduled and what the topics will be. So, for example, they could bring up a hearing on the public option, but they're unlikely to bring up a hearing on health savings accounts. So that's why the ability to set the agenda and decide what will be discussed, it all flips now to the Democrats. But they will have to work in a bipartisan fashion through the committees if they're going to abide by regular order, which is how these things are typically done, to get a vote on the floor. So obviously, I just mentioned the ability to convene hearings and call witnesses is the most important aspect of control. Next slide. So now we're going to talk about reconciliation. So some past examples have been the Trump tax bill that we had a few years ago, the Affordable Care Act, the Bush tax bills, and why they use reconciliation is obviously because you only need a simple majority. So it allows basically the House or the Senate to act like the House. You just need a simple majority to pass something. You don't require 60, and the filibuster is not in play. But there are lots of fences around what can be done through reconciliation. It can only be used for revenue and direct spending, and any proposal would require either bipartisan support or unanimous Democratic support. So for example, in 2001 with the 50-50 Senate, the Bush tax bill was passed using reconciliation, but it had bipartisan support of 58 senators. So at least 8 Democrats crossed the aisle to pass that bill. Next slide. So the way the process begins is within the House, because all things having to do with the purse have to originate in the House. And so they do a budget resolution, and they have instructions to the relevant committees to achieve specific fiscal targets. So as you've heard, the COVID relief bill has a target of 1.9 trillion. And once the House and the Senate agree to the same budget resolution, the committees get to work drafting their pieces, which they've just completed. They ask that the committees report out their recommendations by a specified date, at which point they're stitched together into a single bill by the Budget Committee, which is what is being done right now, and then sent to the floor for consideration and on to the Senate. Now, we were expecting that to all happen over this coming weekend, but I think that Democrats have thought perhaps about sticking some more things into the bill than originally thought. And so we don't expect a vote until the end of next week or over the weekend next weekend. So there's going to be a delay in getting the bill over to the Senate, but they are still targeting mid-March for passage because that is when unemployment benefits expire. Next slide. All right, so as I said, the Senate can act like the House when considering legislation. A reconciliation bill has certain privileges that other bills and joint resolutions do not. So as I mentioned, there's no filibuster. The motion to proceed is not debatable. Debate is limited. This has been the premise on which the Democrats have said they want to use reconciliation rather than bipartisan give and take for this relief bill, because they feel time is of the essence. So being able to limit the debate is key to getting a vote. Amendments must be germane, so they have to be germane to what is contained in the reconciliation bill. And but the beauty is they can pass with a simple majority. But as I go through this story, you'll see it gets more complicated. Next slide. So it does water down minority rights, as I said. So for this reason, there are rules, and you may have heard this term, the Byrd Rule, which is Senator Byrd, former Senator Byrd from West Virginia. They adopted this rule under Section 313 of the Congressional Budget Act. And it's a set of tests that are very complicated. And there are exceptions to many of these tests, and there are Senate precedents that aren't reflected in the rule or available for us to describe to you, but yet we're told they still control. So it's a little bit like the ACA, where they had to pass the bill in order to know what was in it. Well, if they use one of these precedents or rules that we cannot actually see, we'll know it when it actually happens. Next slide. So, as I said, the reconciliation bill must have an impact on direct spending outlays and revenues. That's one of those are the requirements for reconciliation. And the budgetary effects have to be the primary purpose, not just ancillary to the underlying policy. So for example, here, raising taxes versus overturning Roe v. Wade. Roe v. Wade has nothing to do with budgetary matters, and so it would not be germane or relevant to reconciliation, and would be out of order. Reconciliation cannot increase the deficit any year outside the 10-year budget window, which is really, really important. One of the provisions in the relief bill is an expansion of individual market subsidies. Anyone who is unemployed is automatically deemed at 133% of poverty and eligible for the subsidy. However, it's time limited. It can't be outside the 10-year budget window. So it's for a limited time period. You may recall the Bush tax cuts were also time limited and had to be expanded by Congress. If they're not extended, then things revert back to original law. The reconciliation bill cannot make changes to Social Security, retirement, or disability programs. That is a fatal point of order, and the whole reconciliation bill will be out of order if that were introduced. Next slide, please. So there's a parliamentarian who provides guidance to the presiding officer, who is the vice president. The presiding officer can agree or disagree with that guidance. Generally speaking, they follow the presiding officer listens to the parliamentarian. The Senate is an institution of, as I said, precedents, and that is been an institutional thing forever. But we've seen cracks in that, with precedent. And so, for example, they're talking about doing a minimum wage through reconciliation. And the presiding officer, the vice president, could say, well, I disagree, parliamentarian, with your guidance on whether that is allowable, and they can either agree or disagree. So if the presiding officer agrees and a motion to waive the bird rule is made, then proponents need 60 votes to waive that point of order. On minimum wage, it doesn't appear that Democrats have 60 votes to waive that. And so I don't think that is going to happen. Now, I did mention to you that the bill is being delayed going to the Senate, in part because of this minimum wage issue. And as I understand it, they're trying to add some sweeteners in there to attract enough votes to overcome that. That's become the sticking point as I'm hearing it. If the presiding officer disagrees and allows the offending matter to remain in the bill, opponents can appeal the ruling, but they also need 60 votes to prevail. So next slide. So drafting is critical in reconciliation. And here's a perfect example regarding the individual mandate in the ACA that was recently repealed. They repealed the individual mandate, but in effect, they reduced the penalty to 0. So this is where some creative drafting occurred. Reducing the penalty to 0 in and of itself is subject to the Byrd rule or the individual mandate. So in effect, they achieved the same result just by creative drafting. Next slide. All right, so just some final notes here. Generally, you get 2 bites of the apple on reconciliation, but since the option was not used in 2021, they'll actually get a 3rd reconciliation option in 2023. So this is the first so-called bite of the apple that the Dems have to use that process. Some of the big things that are in this bill are all largely COVID related. Vaccination expansion efforts, direct checks to households, state and local funding, which has been a big bone of contention between the two sides, particularly since when Republicans were in charge, Mr. McConnell argued that we couldn't do state and local unless we got some relief for employers in terms of liability exposure, which is absent now in the Democratic bill. There's special spending for food assistance, small business lending, cybersecurity, and a host of other things. I think that there's some other targeted funding for specific industries that had been previously excluded, like the airlines, hotel, restaurants, and so forth. So who to watch on the healthcare side are Senator Wyden, who is chair of Senate Finance Committee, Senator Murray of the Help Committee, and of course, Mr. Sanders, who is the budget chairman in the Senate. Provisions at risk due to the Byrd rule, as I mentioned, are the minimum wage or mandatory paid leave. Again, mandatory paid leave is, that is, in terms of the cost, is secondary to the policy, and therefore would be subject to the Byrd rule. And then we think that in a second reconciliation will more than likely be for infrastructure and possibly additional COVID if necessary. The infrastructure, I hear they will also include some provisions around climate change in the guise of infrastructure. But we shall see. Also affecting possible reconciliation could be, and I'll talk about this later, is the Supreme Court case. Next slide, please.
John, I'm going to cut in. It is time for polling questions, so that we're going to do 2 of these so that we can all get our continuing education credit. So
Okay.
let you take a breath, and we'll go ahead and queue up our question. And we need lots of yes answers on this one. Thank you. You can continue.
All right. Oh, can I get that box to disappear? Or can I do it? Oh, okay. There we go. And next slide, please. All right. So the filibuster is a long, time-honored rule that gives the minority some rights. This is the big one. The rule that you need 60. And the only way that I see that going away is if even bipartisan bills can't get through. There could be a buildup for pressure to eliminate the filibuster. But there are a couple of Democrats, in particular, Mr. Manchin and Kristen Sinema of Arizona, who've already very publicly said they would oppose elimination of the filibuster. So that means that they'll have to try to work together in a bipartisan way when they're not doing reconciliation. And I think there will be a number of bills, and I'm already seeing bills now being dropped in a bipartisan fashion. So believe it or not, bipartisanship does still exist here, but on these big items, I think that Democrats are looking to make, put their stamp on it. So next slide. So what's likely to happen? Well, must pass legislation become a vehicle for other issues, such as the Medicare Trust Fund is pending insolvency, expiration of sequester relief, the debt limit extension, which I believe is in late June or early in July. I think I have it on a slide coming up. And as I mentioned, the Supreme Court ACA decision, depending on what that looks like. There'll be fewer big legislative deals. I think that, the president has been very active in using his authorities to affect change wherever he can. So we'll just see how this unfolds this year. Next slide. All right, so I mentioned these 2 people, but there are also other Senator Collins, Mark Kelly, who is a new senator from Arizona, also a likely opponent. There's this sort of center here. This is where the center is, the moderates. There have been this so-called policy gangs. There was a so-called policy gang before the reconciliation bill to try a last-ditch attempt to do a bipartisan big bill, relief bill, and they met with the president at the White House, who still opted for reconciliation. Next slide. So I mentioned executive orders. These are specifically those that are more healthcare related. I want to call your attention to the second one, which is establishment of racial and ethnic disparities task force. We've been told that future bill considerations will be done through that lens in terms of how it affects racial and ethnic disparities. Those of you in the Medicare space are familiar with the observation rule, or not necessarily a rule, but that situation where they need a 3-day inpatient stay in order to qualify for SNF. And there's been some recent studies done that demonstrate that those with who are low income and probably fall into these racial and ethnic disparities are mostly highly affected by the observation status. And this data shows that they're cycling through the hospital numerous times on observation status and being denied their right to SNF care. And those who are getting SNF care are actually not repeating in the hospital. So I think that, at least in terms of that issue, it gives us a leg up if they're using this as a tool to eliminate racial and ethnic disparities. Next slide, please. So Biden on healthcare are that he's talked a lot about strengthening the ACA. And as a part of that, one of the provisions in the relief bill will be to allow those who are unemployed to automatically qualify at 133% for the subsidy, expansion, regardless of what their income actually is. Now, again, this provision's only good for a certain amount of time because of the 10-year time horizon. So it's going to be time limited. He has talked about state reinsurance dollars. That is something that we have always supported. We think that reinsurance is a good way to lower premiums by as much as 20%, and some states have moved in that direction. Maine and Alaska come to mind, and there are a few other states. I mentioned expanding the subsidies, some changes to enrollment, cost sharing reductions, and so forth, tightening the ACA rules, rolling back short-term limited duration plans back to the original position under President Obama. And association health plan rules will be revised and perhaps rescinded. Those that are already in place can continue if they were already, but new entrants will be an issue probably. I think that there are a couple of things that they will keep. I think they like the ability for people to, I'm trying to think of the term of art, where they can, an employer can use, buy into basically the individual market. But I think that short-term limited duration plans are probably gone in large part, and the AHP rules will at the very least be revised and maybe even rescinded. Next slide, please. So the president has talked about state and local aid. That will definitely be in the next package. I think, though, that there is some agreement on the formula for this. Frankly, Republicans didn't want it to be used to bail out union plans and such, but for actually used for vaccine distributions and such. But we'll see how this actually turns out when we get all the bill language. Next slide. All right, so during the campaign, the President Biden now spoke a lot about his opposition to single payer Medicare for all, and really helping or protecting the ACA, maybe even plussing it up. But he has not ruled out a public option and the cost of more subsidies. I think that the public option is something that is very much in our concern, right? Because that's really the camel's nose under the tent. It is the ability of a public program to not create an unlevel playing field and be very disruptive in the market. I hate how it's called an option, right? Don't you? I mean, a public option, boy, that just sounds pretty darn optional. And I think that once you start to tear apart the employer group plans, you know, we lose our place in the market, basically. So we're watching that in the states very closely. The administration's looking at, you know, more limitations on short-term plans, association health plans, rescinding some of the flexibilities, addressing the family glitch is something that I think we might even see in this bill that's moving along. And there's already been an executive order related to special enrollment periods. We'll go to the next slide. All right, so you'll still hear calls for Medicare for all, which is really Medicare for none. This is, but they're going to put it under the guise of Medicare for all because Medicare is frankly, you know, well liked by beneficiaries in Medicare. The public option could be in play, but it's hard to see how it will overcome the vote requirement. And a bird rule challenge. As we said, this is very difficult hurdle to overcome in reconciliation. And it would be a violation of the budget rules. Lowering the age of Medicare to 62 or, you know, there are already solvency issues. They're going to have to address Medicare solvency. And we're going to talk a lot about that at our Capitol conference. Meanwhile, states are proposing public options at a pretty rapid pace. We're keeping track of them. There are all sorts of iterations of what that is. We've seen that in California, especially. And the use of 1332 waivers for a public option plan at the state level. I think, you know, the secretary for HHS will be highly scrutinized on these questions. Next slide, please. All right, so the individual market, as we know, is really a small proportion of compared to the employer market. One of the proposals right now is to really, as I said, plus up the individual market subsidy, and there's a COBRA subsidy that is much lower. And so there could be advantages to being in the individual market, but we can talk about that some more. The tax exclusion is in danger as a funding mechanism for subsidy increases. So this is a line in the sand for us. It becomes a convenient piggy bank or pay for these other ideas. And so we will be, we're watching that very closely. Next slide. Okay, so I mentioned Medicare solvency and extending the debt limit. So Congress is coming to that point where they're going to have to look at the Medicare program. They're looking for, the Democrats would like to expand the benefits to hearing, dental, vision, to see how hospitals and other providers will make it during the pandemic. There could be changes in nursing home payments, quality, staffing requirements, coding, all sorts of different things. Next slide.
John, I'm going to step in again. Let you take your breath because it's time for our second and final polling question of the day. And yeah, go ahead and answer this for us. That'll get rid of this box. And we're interested to know. I can tell you like ice cream.
I do, most assuredly. Let me know when you want me to.
You're ready. Go ahead. We're done.
Okay. All right. So drug pricing. Very hot issue right now. I think there is room for bipartisanship on this issue. I think that it's reached a point where both sides are sort of softening somewhat on drug pricing and how that will be handled. But it's a question of how far Democrats are willing to go on drug pricing, if it's what they've proposed in the past, knowing that it would only go as far as the House with Democratic votes, or will they open it up and try to make it use the committee process and truly make it bipartisan? I think though, with regard to importation policy, I think a lot of things are on the table. The rebate policy could be rolled back due to some of the sticker shock and Part D premiums. I know that, look, seniors vote, and the House is up every 2 years. And so do they really want to rock the boat when margins are this close in the House? We shall see. The 340B policy is also very, very hot. And, this is the thing. They start off with a decent policy, and then they try to water it down and make changes to it in ways that were not originally intended. So we'll see what all they're willing to put on the table. Next slide. All right. So drug pricing, healthcare policy, lots of things on the the docket, you know, right now, everything is related to what's going on right now with the, hold on a second. Let's just go on to the next slide, please. All right, surprise billing. So we had a long debate about this. I think probably about 18 months long. We opposed arbitration as a solution. Private equity firms have been pushing for a different model. Physicians weighed in very heavily. I'll tell you, it was one of the most brutal fights I've ever been a part of in Washington. They did take the consumer out of surprise billing. They cannot use Medicare rates. I think that the way it turned out was that neither side was satisfied with the outcome. And so I think the next fight will actually be on the regulatory side of it. I think that as long as arbitration includes consideration of not just lawyerly kind of considerations, but actually, other things, then I think, it'll be okay. Let's go to the next slide. Transparency. All right. So in terms of broker comp, there's a lot of transparency or ideas out there, and that now includes agents and brokers comp. We talked to them about the 5,500 reporting that we already do. What sort of onerous additional requirements that places on other markets like the individual market and small group market are going to be difficult. But I think that once we get to the regulatory part of this, we can smooth out some of these contours. Next slide. All right. So on FSAs, we are going to get some flexibility here to make some rollovers. We've asked Congress repeatedly to allow some relief in this regard because of the pandemic. So let's go to the next slide. All right. So as I said, a lot of the surprise billing issues are now moving into the regulatory space. What I like about that is that it sort of takes the politics out of it, and it becomes really then how things will be operationalized. Nothing goes into effect until the end of 2021, and some of you may have heard otherwise, but that is the case. The next slide. All right. So depending on what happens this summer with regard to California versus Texas, will determine kind of the next step in terms of what Congress does, if they do, what sort of legislation that they might propose, or a reconciliation if it ends up in something like that. Let's go to the next slide. So we continue to work with the president and congressional leadership. There are a lot of people, we've already reached out. In fact, we did right after the election. Part of our team, which is Pac Madigan Jones, one of the principals worked for the president when he was in the Senate. And so we have a strong sense of kind of what his thinking is. And we know a number of the people that are coming up for roles in the federal agencies. The next slide. So, you know, this year's fly-in is virtual. We really have some great speakers. We've tried to line up an agenda that I think will speak to you. Things are happening rapidly here in Washington. Like I said at the outset, that, you know, we may be spending more time in our home, but things are moving very quickly on Capitol Hill, for better or for worse. And there are lots of new members. We really need your participation and input. I think, I know that, you know, it's easy to register later, but please go ahead and register for it now. The price is right. And I think that you will benefit from the program that we have this year. Next slide. And I think that's it. So I can take questions.
We do have some questions, John. So I'm going to just go through the first one. The question is directed to our state PAC, but I think the question can be directed to both the state PAC as well as the federal HUPAC. And we have members who, many of us, donate to both. And yet it's really hard for us to see how we get credit for the way that our money is spent, how we know that as an industry that how, I guess I shouldn't say as an industry, but as members, it's not really clear as far as where our money goes and how we get credit for that. So is there anything you can shed some light on to members of the association that are contributing? And once again, many of us are.
Sure. Well, you do have regional chairs for the PAC, and you can always ping your regional person. The board lineup is on the HUPAC website, and you can always send them a question about giving or suggestions about who we should give to and why. We do try to be transparent about our giving. We try to be strategic based on committee assignment and relevance to healthcare or other special considerations. And so you can always write to me as well if you have a question or concern about our giving. Basically, the threshold is, will they listen to us? Will they listen to you? You know, there has to be a reason. And if you have someone that you think we should be considering, you're always welcome to reach out to your local HUPAC person and make that suggestion.
Okay, thank you. Another question.
Sure.
The budget item giving municipalities funds seems to be bailing out irresponsible spending in cities and requiring all taxpayers in the country to fund it. Am I correct?
Well, in what manner of speaking are we talking about?
Unfortunately, I don't have more detail for that question, but I mean, it seems like the question that's coming about is obviously we have some municipalities that are run better than others, and we are federal tax dollars seem to be bailing them out. Is that something that I guess that's something is we as an association, do we take a stand on that? Is there anything we can do to assist in that area?
Well, for our industry, we have our healthcare lane. So if it falls outside of that, then that is something I don't know how much we would be trying to impact.
Okay, I've got a couple other questions.
Sure.
With the trillions and trillions of dollars in deficit spending, it is obvious that eventually Congress will need to pay the piper and increase revenue. This could occur by increasing capital gains, eliminating certain deductions, changing estate taxes, and increasing taxes for those in the top tax bracket. Is there any talk of using the upcoming or future reconciliation bills to make tax changes?
Not in the way that I understand the question, though. The questioner makes a good point that these things have to be eventually paid for us by us all. I think that the recent tax cut that we had by former President Trump will be revisited. I think also I mentioned Medicare solvency, and I could see further tax increases there, and adjustments to the taxes that we pay through our employment. So yeah, I think that right now we're in that it feels it's good to spend money, but eventually we'll have to figure out how it's all paid for. So, I mean, that's a point well taken. I think we went through the same thing with President Obama, who, a lot of the benefits of the ACA came early, and then some of the more painful parts came later. And so it could be the same repeating itself.
Okay, and John, looks like we have one last question, which is good because we're kind of right up against the end of the time we have allotted for you. What are changes expected with association health plan rules? So in Utah, association plans are fairly common and fairly popular here. So do you see any changes on the federal level with respect to how association health plans are regulated?
Well, not in the short run, I don't. I think that they have other fish to fry right now. So I'm not hearing anything on the immediate horizon with regard to AHPs. I think short-term limited duration plans, yes. I think AHPs may be more of a holding pattern for right now. But I think unless something is like more directly related to COVID, those are the sort of priority matters. So increasing subsidies, as I mentioned, and in the exchanges, perhaps some COBRA, that sort of thing will be front and center.
All right. Well, thank you very much for your time today, John. We
You're
really
welcome.
appreciate it, and great presentation.
Thank you.
Have a great day.
You too.
Now, I would like to hand things over to Micah Smith. She is the Vice President of the Utah Association of Health Underwriters. She's actually going to close the show for us today. So just want to thank everybody for participating for our first and probably last virtual day on the Hill. But I know it's hard to sit through all of this virtually, and appreciate your time and attention today. And Micah, I'm going to hand this over to you.
Thanks, Ernie. Hi, and thank you everyone for spending your snowy Wednesday morning with us. I think we picked a perfect day to host a virtual day on the Hill. A big thank you goes to Ernie and our legislative team for organizing this event for all of our members. We want to thank our sponsors again for their support of UAHU and this event. Thank you, Cigna, Regents, and United Healthcare. Without your support, we could not provide these events to our membership, and we appreciate your the partnership that you provide. Thank you to TDA for your continued support with our CE credits. We know those are important to everyone. Thank you to all of our fantastic speakers who volunteered their time to educate us on all these important legislative issues. Please be on the lookout for more information on our March 10th Ethics CE event, our virtual sales congress, May 19th and 20th, and that's on a totally different virtual platform. So it's not going to be your normal Zoom. So we're very excited for that. And we're most excited for our golf tournament on June 8th, which we hope to see everyone in person. We're very excited for that. You can stay up to date on all of our events on our new uahu.org website. Again, we thank you for your participation and we encourage you to stay active in UAHU. This is a volunteer organization and we need your involvement to move our association forward. So thank you again. Enjoy the rest of your day and stay safe. Bye, everyone.